Hello?
Hello.
Okay.
No, it's not okay.
Can't hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, good.
All right, hit me up. Name and pronouns. What's on your mind?
I'll be using, I don't know, my Bamslino. I'll just keep the screen name. I'm also there on Twitter. I was behind the anarchist Twitter discourse a few weeks ago.
Okay, I'm gonna,
And,
and this isn't a debate tactic on my part. I humbly request you say that again and 20% slower.
sorry, um, I'm gonna use Bamslino as my name. So I'm also at Bamslino on Twitter.
Okay?
And I was the person, if you might recognize that, because I was the person behind the anarchist supply line drama, like the whole discourse thing. I
Oh, I
was the
love
person replying.
discourse.
It's, I guess my claim to fame.
And pronouns?
I don't care.
All right.
I'm trying to.
Well, hit
Okay.
me up. Wait, so you were the person who was arguing with Doe?
Yes, I replied. I don't know, it wasn't an argument. I just asked a question and like I got blocked
Question
and
asking
nothing
with Doe.
happened.
Yeah, gotcha. All right, well, hit me up. I don't even remember what we disagreed on. The
Okay, so
email title
the
said
first time,
NATO, so I don't know if you're pro
the
or
first time I
anti.
messaged you, it was on. I saw you said NATO was good, and I sent my arguments. But then you in the email said you have you heard my arguments, and you said those convinced you. Like you said, you might adjust some of your arguments. And the second email, the one that got the debate, was over. You mentioned you were talking about the geopolitics of Yugoslavia historically, and I had some disagreements with the way you phrase those things. You know, particularly around Western involvement in the dissolution of Yugoslavia and the bombing of Yugoslavia and Libya, which I think you were a little cavalier on.
Well, I'm happy to hear criticisms. It's not something I've done a full research stream on yet, so if you come out here, you bust me out with the dates and times, it'll be tough for me to respond. So this is like a good opportunity for you to kick my ass. I don't recall what disagreements we had over. Oh, I forgot the game. I don't remember what disagreements we had over email because I get a lot of correspondence. If I said that my positions might be moved over by something, that's a very loose guarantee though, because I get a lot of people who are critiquing me. I can't argue with everyone all the time on email. I don't have the time, but I always read what I get. So I did read whatever you sent me.
So, you want to start with the stuff that you just said debate, or the stuff that we already emailed over, but you said you heard the arguments, they're good arguments, and I might adjust on my arguments because we can do that again if you
Here,
want.
yeah, hit me with the NATO stuff. I want to know.
Okay, so let's the take that I understood your take was that you said being pro NATO is fine because you said that it's not, you basically, let me find the email what you just said. You said NATO is good, right? You're like pro NATO. Is that correct?
It's not necessarily that I'm pro-NATO. Well, I'm pro-NATO in the sense of,
I
like,
mean,
Ukraine and, like, containing Russian expansion. I just think that a
so
lot
you
of...
were being hyperbolic when you said I'm pro NATO. I don't even care what anyone says. Like NATO is good. Like don't at me, basically.
Well,
Like in that video.
obviously that's slightly simplistic, with a degree of hyperbole. I think that, like, NATO is good insofar as it protects countries in Eastern Europe from Russian aggression. And I think that lefties online massively overstate the extent to which
Okay.
NATO is like the vanguard of imperialism from the West. I genuinely do not think that
So
it
the
is.
first thing I want to push back on is like Eastern Europe. I think Eastern Europe is being used like it's too broad, basically. Like you're saying Eastern Europe, but there's actually a lot of different countries in Eastern Europe, and the relationship with NATO is like very different depending where they are. But I think, for example, like that's one of the things I'll push back on. But I don't think like it's valid to say that like East protects Eastern Europe when it actually like Eastern Europe's a bunch of countries and they have different relationships, uh, like to NATO and Russia, and so the impact on them is like pretty vastly
Well,
different
they all
depending on
ask to
which country
be
they are.
in NATO, don't they?
No,
You have to
like
ask to be in NATO to be a part of NATO.
you have to ask to be in NATO, but like it's geopolitics, you know. So you can, but you can be like basically, yeah. That's not the important step. Like if a country wants to be in NATO, they just like one official needs to ask like on pay the paperwork be in NATO, but it can be like relatively easy like to depending on the country to coerce the country to join NATO.
Okay, so I want to know about that. Because I agree that in concept it's possible for countries to be kind of like politically pressured into joining NATO. But when looking into it, I haven't really found that much evidence to support that idea. It seems like countries that are a part of NATO want to be a part of NATO because they sincerely, obviously there are requirements to be in NATO. Political pressure is involved. They have to maintain a certain level of troop development, though a lot of countries don't anyway. And they prefer that if it means knowing Russia can't fuck with them,
Okay, but that's a little. See, I guess framing is a little strange because, think about it. For example, there are countries that are not bordering Russia, so it's a little weird. We agree NATO is a military alliance primarily, but there's countries that don't get much out of it because they're not bordering Russia. In fact, I think what's the argument there? But why would they join NATO?
Like France and England or what have you?
I was thinking right now it's Czernogorod, so Montenegro.
Montenegro? I have no idea.
It's being pushed towards
Well, I don't know. I don't know enough about that situation. Most of the people who are in NATO right now are either legacy participants from the Cold War, back when NATO was much more relevant for people broadly in Europe. And since then, the expansions have mostly been countries that are post-Soviet bloc states that want to avoid Russian pressure.
Post-Soviet bloc, I think Russian pressure is doing a lot of heavy lifting here because it's kind of vague. Certain countries obviously are a direct military threat from are directly threatened militarily by Russia, but other countries they're not really threatened directly by Russia. So it's not a very strong argument.
Well, because of NATO, right? NATO guarantees that.
Well, no, they're just not directly under threat from Russia. Countries in the Balkans, for example, they're just they're not
Well, sure, but I'm not sure what you mean exactly. Not every country that's going to be a part of NATO is literally facing a Russian invasion right then at that moment, right? It's not about that. It's just about if these countries feel as though it's in their strategic interest to be a part of NATO, they seem to choose to be. I just don't think countries really get bullied into being a part of NATO. They seem to want it. It provides them a great degree of security.
See, but I think most countries in NATO are not under direct threat from Russia militarily. Ukraine is relatively exceptional there. The Baltic states are also relatively exceptional there. Most countries are just not under direct threat from Russia to be invaded. That's not the security there. They might have.
Well, yeah, because they're a part of NATO.
Well, no, because they're just not. They're not bordering Russia. They're not Russia's not going to
Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. I think
the Baltics. I agree with those. There's a different situation.
Right. Well, so I guess my issue is that I don't need to make this point. If those countries want to be a part of a defensive alliance, who am I to say they can't be? I don't need to argue their case for them. If they think it's in their strategic interest, then that's why they asked for it.
I think they're being. I think it's much more likely they're being. It's much more evident they're being pressured into being aligned with NATO as a symbol for being aligned with away from Russia Western interests.
Is there any evidence of that?
In Montenegro, there were loans that were approved on the condition of NATO membership.
I'm very sorry. I don't know anything about the Montenegro situation. You could be correct. I genuinely just don't know anything about, to be real, anything about that country's relationship with NATO.
Okay. I think generally there's just not a lot of evidence for the benefit these countries are getting out of the strategic alliance in terms of militarily. That's not just a general sign of a symbol of geopolitical allegiance with the cost. They're.
I mean, they want to join it. Ukraine wants to join it. Turkey wants to join it. Wanted, another.
Well, Turkey specifically, I think is a good example because Turkey benefits from the military alliance in a pretty aggressive way. Turkey is able to take military actions because they know that if they're retaliated against, they have the backing of NATO. Engage in more aggression. And I think they're so. My point is I think certain countries have different relationship. I'll try to speak a little slower. Sorry. Certain countries have different relationship with NATO, and I think the brush being painted doesn't apply to a lot of them. The Baltic states and Ukraine have a very specific relation in terms of a direct defensive strategic interest in defending against Russia and Russian aggression. And Turkey benefits because it allows it to take pretty aggressive action, in the Middle East without strong fear of retaliation.
What if countries just want to be part of a secure military alliance? It's not just about direct invasion also. Russia has lots of underhanded ways of intervening in neighboring countries. Maybe if a country is a part of NATO, they feel like they have Russia has even less of a potential pretense to engage in that kind of behavior. I guess like again, I don't really feel like I need to make the case on behalf of these countries why they would want to be part of the strongest military alliance in the history of the world when they clearly want to and have fought to and like made official requests for it, and there isn't like really strong evidence that they all got like bullied or cajoled into it. They can leave if they want to. France left NATO.
I think France is in a very different bargaining position than most of these countries, for sure. Smaller countries that don't have the position like to make that kind of like it's
I mean,
actually
they
like
can.
it's a big security risk for a country to leave NATO. Like if a country's part of NATO, that means they're aware of like NATO, information that's like military information.
Well, they probably want
like,
that, don't they?
no, but like I think it'd be very different. I think there would be a lot of pressure to prevent a country from leaving NATO if they know. Like I think there's basically no chance, like no shot that the major NATO members would be like okay with a country leaving NATO once they have access to all that information. Like if especially if
With
if they're
respect, I think that is very conspiratorial. The idea that they can't leave NATO because like it's like a mafia situation, like they know too much or whatever. I don't think
well,
that's
it's just
true.
like not. It's not like the number one reason to leave NATO would be to align themselves with to be able to align themselves with a different, geopolitical interest. Like investments from like if you once being part of NATO allows pressure, like allows them to put pressures on, for example, which economic ties they can have, like with China. So like the number one reason, for example, to leave NATO, like one of the strongest reasons to leave NATO is to, as a smaller country, be allowed to have more ties with China,
Well, we
and that's
already have
exactly the kind of
ties. America has very strong trade relations with China. I'm pretty sure that
yes,
NATO.
because they're America, they're the hegemon. But America doesn't want smaller countries in its sphere of influence to have strong ties with China because it benefits from having those ties being with Europe and America.
But NATO involvement doesn't come with a precondition that you can't trade with China.
It basically does in certain situations. These smaller, like European countries, like they were basically put under a sphere of influence as part of like joining
Okay,
NATO.
but they chose to join that sphere of influence.
Okay, do you agree, for example, that like the IMF, like when countries take IMF loans, do they choose to like take those loans?
I don't think these situations are even remotely comparable. The IMF deliberately goes after economically weak countries and will only give them economic assistance if they cede to a ton of like neoliberal economic reforms. Whereas NATO is a voluntary military alliance that comes with benefits and drawbacks that we have, at least by all available evidence, countries willfully choosing to join. I'm not saying there's not an implicitly coercive element to it, but there is to basically all geopolitical engagement. Like all trade, all politics is going to involve that.
Why is one of those voluntary though, and one of those I think those are both like the loans are also voluntary. They're not like in a sense like the same sense. Like they're on paper at least asking for the loans.
Because I think they're different degrees of exploitative. You realize this argument could be applied to literally all behavior all countries engage in, right? All trade deals, all agreements, all military alliances, all of it could be filtered through this analysis. And it's like, well, it's all exploitative, therefore it's all bad, But I think what the IMF does, by the way, keep in mind, the purpose of the IMF is hollowing out a country's natural resources to make them amenable to American business investment. Whereas the purpose of NATO is simply to like form a broader like geopolitical military bloc. I think that
I think that's
countries,
a little bit like the level of shareability there could be
countries
kind of
that countries that cede to IMF demands are made economically weak and compliant, and countries that join NATO are made militarily strong and dependable. I think that's the difference. NATO is good for these countries.
like how do a lot of these countries benefit from like these, especially like the not the Baltics, not Ukraine, but the other like countries, like they're not benefiting from like you're saying that they benefit from the sorry you benefit from the alliance, but I don't think that these benefits I don't think are very like I don't think there's actually a lot of evidence for these benefits. Like if there's a war, like a major conflict, they will have to send troops to fight, and they're not really getting out of these. Most of these countries are not in very at risk of direct military conflict.
Okay, maybe they just want to be a part of the strongest military bloc in the world. Like, who wouldn't want to be? That seems like a really great deal. It's like these countries have been clamoring for NATO membership ever since the Cold War ended.
I think it's much more likely they're clamoring for like. I think it's a much stronger explanation for why they want membership is because by aligning themselves with that power group, they signal membership that gets to become that later becomes like membership within a group that provides economic benefit later.
Okay, well, sure. But they can be a part of the first of all, if they want economic benefits, they can be a part of the EU and receive full benefits of being part of the EU without joining NATO. It's not as though they are disallowed from trading with Europe before joining NATO. That is just not the case. But if they want to align with the hegemon, like, yeah, of course they would, right? Like, that makes sense.
For the smaller countries, they basically do have to join NATO or to become part of the EU and other trading blocks like that.
No, they did. No, they don't. I am not aware of any evidence of EU trading partnership being held as a condition of NATO acceptance. Like, Finland isn't a part of NATO. Like,
it's a bigger, better country. Like it's
well,
these are not like
but you can't keep making exceptions, though, right? Like, I don't think there's any evidence of that. If there was, then I would strongly disagree with it. Like, you only get to trade with us if you join our military alliance. Like, I would disagree with that strongly. But remember, part of the protests in Ukraine with the Euromaidan was that Yanukovych had promised to align himself economically with the EU without being a part of NATO, and the EU was going to accept him. Back before all the shenanigans in 2014, like, Ukraine was poised to join with the EU fully, to be like part of that trade bloc, with no expectation that they would be a part of NATO at the time they did that.
I think because Ukraine's position, it's different than, for example, countries like Montenegro, like Croatia, Slovenia. These countries are like positioned in like basically like Romania, Hungary. I think these countries are set up that like that the setup that I think like I know for sure Montenegro. That's why I know the most because that's like where I'm from.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm just not that familiar with Montenegro. It's unfortunate we don't have an overlap in knowledge there, but I just don't know much about that. I would have to look into it. Before
I'm like reticent to make too many I'm reticent to basically say I'm focusing on because that's where I know the most. So I'm focusing on that. I'm not trying to like focus on that you don't know. But like they basically to have a chance at EU membership, it was like NATO membership was basically like required. Like it was in order to like it's just like you said, like they were basically joining the military alliance, especially relevant there because of the long-standing cultural ties to Russia, which were displaced by when membership was used to displace.
I would have to look into it.
Okay. Like I guess I don't know. I think it's
so.
I'm not
wait,
sure
maybe with Montenegro, maybe there was some fuckery that took place there. But would you agree then that like for the rest of these countries that are a part of NATO, like they're fine?
I think the Baltics have a strong argument because they're the border with Russia. Ukraine obviously has an argument, but I think so a lot of like I think a lot of other countries aren't like directly being threatened by Russia that way. I think the argument is much weaker, especially in the.
But they still want to like. It doesn't matter what your argument in favor of them joining NATO is. If they want to join NATO, it's their right to join NATO.
I think in the Balkan countries especially, there's a strong. I think the basic EU membership and economic ties was basically conditional on NATO membership, strengthening those. So it was similar to the IMF in the way that it was like coercive in that way because there was basically economic to join. You had to join a military alliance to engage in the economic trades that benefit the country needed, that benefit, as you said.
I just haven't seen evidence of that being the case. I would have to look into it more. Even if that was the case, though, I could still support, like, the concept of NATO, or of, like, a military alliance that functions the way NATO does, without that. Like, I would simply, like, disavow that fuckery, and then continue to support, you know, the rest of what they do. I would just say like that would be an exception to what was otherwise a worthwhile a worthwhile thing.
I think the NATO allows I have some more generic or I guess more general expanded criticisms. NATO too, where like it allows the US to exert a lot of influence on European politics, but I don't think it's very like good for Europe. Like it doesn't. I think NATO with US as a member of it, at the very least, contributes have like is able to be used in that way.
Um,
to negative attack.
I agree that more autonomy within NATO on Europe's part would be good. That being said, though, I don't really take issue with that, I guess. Like, America holds global influence anyway. We would have influence over Europe whether or not we shared a NATO, right? Because,
We'd have more influence with NATO, though.
well, sure,
I
but it's
think
America.
that's.
And also, I think for the most part, people in Europe kind of like that influence because the influence is a product of our disproportionate investment into NATO, right? Like the fact that we spend so much money on our military, and they like that because it means we're essentially like subsidizing their low military budgets. So I don't know. They probably to an extent benefit from it. Yeah.
I think, for example, I think it means Europe can't act as independently because they're kind of beholden to a disproportionate amount of American influence. Like I agree, America would have a ton of influence regardless. It's the global power, like the main global power. But I don't think this is. I think it's good for more regions to be more autonomous.
Independently in what respect, though?
Able to pursue, for example, like a less American centric politics, including economic politics.
Well,
Like able to.
how does our disproportionate investment in NATO lead to them not being able to make their own economic decisions?
It doesn't like prevent it entirely, but it gives U.S. influence over the uh, the political alignment of the area.
I don't really see how. I don't think. I understand we wield a tremendous amount of influence, but I feel like we're generalizing a lot here, right? Like the idea that we're like us investing in NATO means that like we're what, like rigging their elections or whatever.
I don't know, just like obviously in Europe there's like more uh pro American party like parties that are like have different alignments, and it just gives the parties that are more aligned with NATO disproportionate, and then
Well,
the
yeah, that's
influence on.
politics. People in Europe seem to like America's investment in NATO. Like you can't treat our investment in NATO as a nefarious political scheme when the outcome of it is that people in Europe will be more pro NATO because they like the outcome of NATO. Like, yeah, that's just
So I guess some more specific criticisms. Sorry, I'll try to speak slower. Is that, for example, NATO creates arms reliances, in certain cases, and thus gives the U.S. Disproportionate influence over the policies those countries, the basically like the military diplomatic policies because of the arms reliances.
wait, how so?
Things like the arms being used or like America, the U.S. has strong influence over the arms being used, which influences things because of things like replacement parts, maintenance, and stuff. These are all, become tied to like towards the U.S. Towards the U.S., which gives it disproportionate influence over those countries' policies.
Okay, I don't understand. What policies? Do you mean in terms of their military readiness? Shouldn't we have disproportionate influence over that since we're like the most militarily powerful country on the planet by an almost exponential factor, and they're part of our military alliance and they rely on and enjoy our military supremacy, which protects them? I wouldn't want, for example, their membership in NATO to make us rig their elections or whatever. But if their membership in NATO led to them having their military policies or readiness being dictated disproportionately by us, I think that's probably a good thing, right? Like, that seems like kind of part of the package of signing up. Like, that's a benefit to them. Like, hey, join NATO and you get like America standard arms production and training. Like that's probably a pretty good thing, right?
I think, but it creates a situation where it's like self reinforcing. Like it makes moving, it makes pivoting away harder because it entrenches the America aligned situation.
Sure, but in this case, we're just talking about like if it's policies pertaining to like again, I would agree with you if these were civic policies, but if it's about military stuff specifically, like I mean, why not? Like why shouldn't their military policies be heavily influenced by us? Like, we are their military.
Because not only are we our military, like, are not like we U.S. Not only is the U.S. The military currently, it makes it difficult to move away from it because it entrenches this like the military arrangement so that by increasing the cost increasing the cost of changing it,
But that would
changing the
only be a
situations.
problem for me if it was like a bad thing that I cared about us moving away from. I don't really care if like America has disproportionate influence over military structure in Europe. Like you could say the same thing about like welfare.
Sure, but
Like,
can we agree that like states care a lot about like military policy has an effect on like influences states, like the behavior and policies and politics of states.
well,
As
I
to,
think it depends. Like that's a general statement that I agree with generally, but if you were to be more specific with the statement, do you think that like NATO being mostly an American-led thing influences European civic politics? Then I think my answer to that would
yes, I think it makes them more aligned with the United States
well,
and
yeah, but
the politics of the United States.
that's the point. Like that's the point of an alliance. Like you
Sure,
can't
but
point at an alliance that everyone willfully entered and go like the problem with this alliance is that it's leading to them being allies. Like, yeah,
I mean,
that's
it's
the
just
point.
I think a more independent, autonomous Europe would benefit the Europeans
Well, you
much
can't fault
more.
them for wanting to ally with us. We're the strongest country on the planet. Like that's not like I can't like isn't that their right? Like shouldn't they want that? Like don't get me wrong. I don't want America to be calling the shots from everywhere around the world, but like we have to find better ways of encouraging local autonomy than like opposing the concept of like-minded countries allying with each other.
If a country in Europe made a policy decision that you disagreed with, uh, would that be their right too? Like I feel like this argument, like
Wait, they do
how
make policy
Hungary,
decisions I disagree
sure, but
with.
is like when when Hungary makes a political like a you know a when makes enacts like a makes a political decision you disagree with,
Huh?
you might say it's their right to make that. I guess do you? I don't want to speak for you,
Well, yeah, they're an autonomous country. Though if
but
I
would you
feel
say
like if I disagree with that decision, then I would probably try to find ways to politically push against it within available means.
sure? So it's the same thing. Like obviously, for some countries it's their right to join NATO. I agree there. Although I think other countries it's a lot more coercive. But we still wouldn't like say we're pro that position, even though like the same way I assume you're not pro Orban's policies, despite Hungary having a right to as an autonomous country to enact those laws.
I don't know what the relationship is between these things. I don't have a problem with NATO. I just don't have an issue with it. I don't think the existence of NATO really hurts people. I think it helps far more people than it hurts because the people who are legitimately helped by it, like otherwise victims of Russian aggression, like in the Baltic, I always mix up Balkan and Baltic. I always mix those up. The Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania.
Politics.
Yeah, yeah. And like Ukraine and stuff. Like I think it helps vastly more people than it hurts. Like the only hurt we're talking about here is like the harm of NATO is that countries in NATO might be allied with the allies they have. It's like, well, okay, I don't know what that has to do with Hungary like wanting to kill all gay people or whatever.
I guess. Do you think you need the entirety of the current? Do you think you need the entirety of the current arrangement of NATO to provide that defensive situation, like
I
the
don't
defensive alliance
I
to
don't
those countries?
I don't care if we need it. It doesn't matter. I don't mind it. NATO could encompass the whole world for all I cared. It wouldn't make a difference to me. Like it's I don't it's not negative. So I don't need to like start looking into like, well, how much can we reduce this system? I don't care
Okay, I
about
guess then
reducing
my
it.
stance is that a more autonomous Europe would have more left, better policies than one that has like as tied more the U.S. has influence over, disproportionate
But
influence
they
over.
they want to have our influence over them. They ask for it. They explicitly want it.
But
Like,
like
what should we pass? Like international law that disallows like countries in Western Europe from being military allies with the US? Like, how do we address this? Like, everyone who's doing this thing wants to be like, we're talking about something where it's beneficial and everyone who's a part of it wants to be a part of it. Like, given that, what system would you put in place to oppose it? Like,
Actually, it's not like it's like it's beneficial in some ways, but it's not beneficial in other ways. Like the same way, I guess I don't understand how this is different from the Hungary example. Like it's there's not a law we could really pass to restrict the autonomy of Hungary
No,
to
this
pass
the
its
stuff that's
laws.
happening in Hungary is bad though. The laws in there are bad. I
Sure,
don't think what's happening with NATO is bad. It's good.
but the imp okay, but the influence the U.S. has on European politics and a less autonomous Europe
But
pushes away from better politics,
they
though.
want that alliance though. They ask
But
for it. They push for that alliance with
isn't that the same
us.
as the Hungarians pushing for what they want? Like,
No, because the Hungarians are pushing for something at the expense of millions of their own people. You're talking about you're talking about coercive elements within an alliance where every member of that alliance wants to be a part of that alliance. I don't see the relationship with it. Like Hungary is a barely functional democracy that's like oppressing its own people more than we do. You know, we all do, but you know, them more than us. I just don't see what that has to do with like everyone in NATO wants to be a part of NATO. Like Europe wants to be a part of NATO. Like who are you to tell them to not? Like who's being hurt by it, right?
the this is like the influence it has pushes them towards worse policies.
Like what worse policies is their presence, their willful and consensual presence in NATO pushing them towards?
It's like in some countries it pushes them towards to be to away from, for example, Chinese investment, which would benefit them because being able to play multiple hegemons off each other is a way for smaller countries
I
to
don't I don't
put
believe
themselves in a better
this.
situation.
You're not going to be able to find any evidence of like a country like NATO strong-arming countries into not trading with China. China trades with probably every single member of NATO.
And then otherwise, like America, clearly, like America, clearly supports certain policies and certain parties and then like that's pushed. Like I think a more autonomous Europe would generally uh
You're
the
not looking at chat, are you?
no, I'm not. I don't have anything open.
All right,
Sorry.
good.
Why?
Don't get distracted on me now. Look, I want Europe to be more autonomous. I just think that there should be ways of pursuing that that aren't because like again, like NATO is just it's just like harmless, you know? And you can be a part of a military alliance. Like the issue here is that like if you really want to tackle the influence America has over Europe, it's not NATO. It's our trade deals. Like that's the real thing. Europe and America are like inseparable when it comes to our trade agreements. We like a breaking apart in that respect would be far more detrimental to Europe than getting rid of NATO. So we can't get rid of that economic relationship without like destroying Europe and America. So that's never going to happen. Like the influence that you're referring to, America's influence, is an inherent part of our massive like geopolitical power that can't really be changed. NATO is like a fractional element of that, a minor one at that. If we want to encourage more European autonomy, I think we should, but I don't think we should do it in ways that are to the detriment of the countries in Europe. Like, the countries in Europe want to be a part of NATO, and they also want to be a part of our trading bloc. So I think that we should try to find ways to encourage their relative autonomy without, like, sort of destructive, you know, interference in these alliances they want to be a part of.
We say NATO's harmless. I don't think it's harmless. Like the way Article 5 works, if there's an attack, yeah, NATO members will send troops generally, and like that's sending citizens to be involved in military conflicts that
Well,
generally they're not part of.
that
Like
is a military
that's a
alliance.
harm.
That
Sure,
that
that's a
is
harm, I would say.
that's the point of a military alliance. Also, you can deny an Article 5 request. Remember what happened after 9/11? America invoked Article 5 and countries turned us down. You know, if they feel that the war isn't just, like they can... We got really mad at France over it, and we did the whole freedom fries bit. But we didn't, like, attack France or whatever, you know? No, that was based of them, yeah, to not answer to that Article 5 request.
Uh,
But,
Obviously, Article 5 has power. Otherwise, it wouldn't mean anything. Like like I think Article 5 like would generally like to involve like if it if denying was costless, then it wouldn't mean anything. So obviously, it's like it's relevant, I think.
Well, no, it's just a military alliance. It's not like international. It's just an alliance. Like, it doesn't mean that if you break the code that your country gets nuked or whatever. It's just, we expect you to do that. And that's fine. Like, that's the point of a military alliance, right? I mean, that's the point of Article 5.
I think saying Article 5 is like it can be optional ignores that like if it was entirely optional, then it it wouldn't be like it wouldn't be meaningful. Like the whole I think
Oh, wait,
there's a
chat's correcting me,
state.
sorry. Article 5 was invoked for Afghanistan after 9/11, which every NATO country participated in. The freedom fries bit with over the Iraq War. Thank you. My bad. Yeah, sorry.
Like I think that stands to. I can't believe I didn't catch that. Like sorry, I'm just like harder to keep track of multiple things at once than I thought it would be. I think, for example, that's a strong evidence in my favor. Like Article 5 was invoked and countries got involved. Like, the Iraq War was the one that wasn't really like this was like relatively distinct from
Yeah,
in
well,
terms of it just being like
if
a neocon project.
Article 5 hadn't been invoked in Afghanistan, then maybe only the United States would have gone in, and that definitely would have changed things for Afghanistan, right?
I think that's like very likely, actually. I think.
Wait,
Like
really?
I think.
Wait, we didn't need anyone else there. They were just there for support. America could single-handedly handle. We didn't need anything other than ourselves there. They were there to like. They were like they're showing up to the ball game to like cheer us on. Like, yeah, we're here, NATO. Let's go. Like, America we can do everything.
It would be better without like without like it would be better if the countries weren't involved, though. Like,
Then
I
why?
actually think it allows them to take a more less interventionist policy, which is good. I think interventions generally
Then then
cause more harm than.
then why did a bunch of NATO countries join us in Iraq, even though we didn't invoke Article 5? It's almost like even without NATO, these countries are still geopolitically aligned with us and find it politically favorable to join us in our conflicts.
Yes, but the reason NATO is relevant is because it increases the chance they will like join those countries. Like,
Okay, but like that's the point of a military alliance, right? Like it seems like we're getting mad at it for, like, you're mad at a military alliance for being both an alliance and military. Like, that's the whole point. Like,
I think a military alliance, like by definition, say supports military actions. I think military actions are generally harmful and bad. Like, we should minimize the amount of countries involved in military actions.
as long as there are
Which military
militaries,
alliances-
wait, no, hold on. Military alliances prevent military actions. That's the point of NATO. When you have a bunch of countries allied in a coalition, you decrease the likelihood of warfare because fighting against that block of countries would be suicide. And also, this is a pretty unrealistic take, right? Like, abolish military involvement. No, people, as long as militaries exist, like, military alliances are going to exist. I think they're a good thing. Like, can you imagine the Cold War, but if, like, there was no NATO or Warsaw Pact? Like, I'm pretty sure that all of Central and Eastern Europe would have been burnt to ash in like a million overlapping proxy wars, before, like, any damage was done to the Soviet Union or to America.
I mean, Yugoslavia wasn't part of the Warsaw Pact, right? Like, that's just true. Yugoslavia was not part of the Warsaw Pact.
Was it not? I don't recall. Of what relevance is that to what I said, though?
I mean, it was in Eastern Europe. It's directly in the Balkans. It was not like nuke dash.
Okay.
I don't know. I just like it's kind of point to your.
I don't know if it counters. Yugoslavia was a pretty. Yeah, I don't know what relevance that is to my point. Anyway,
Didn't you just say that the Warsaw Pact and NATO stopped Eastern Europe from being burnt to ash in proxy wars?
Yeah, I don't think the
Okay,
existence
well,
of
there's
a
a
country
country-
that wasn't in either. Wait, I'm sorry. You do realize that, like, you do realize that military alliances are just an inevitable product of countries having militaries, right? They've been around for literally all of human existence. Like, why would countries not do that?
Country states do lots of things. I don't understand. Sorry, like I think the position here is that as but we should not support certain military alliances because they lots of states do things. States maintain borders by basically by that's as long as states for most as modern states basically need to enforce borders for them to exist as modern
But
states.
I don't think
But
military
worse,
alliances are harmful. Also, don't play. Your position is not anti-military alliance. Your position's anti-NATO. Okay, don't play with me. Okay, I know a lot of this. It's like, oh well, both sides do it. Oh, then I disagree with both sides. Well, no, your issue's with NATO. So like, with regards to military alliances here, you know, I don't think they're inherently harmful. I just don't. I don't want countries fighting, but I feel like the more countries are allied with each other and the larger these political blocs are, the more likely it is that we could prevent that kind of harmful military intervention. It seems like every time NATO does something I disagree with, it's in a situation where the outcome would have been the same with or without NATO, right? Like, you know, like if you take a look at Libya or Yugoslavia or like the, you know, the bombings or whatever, I'm pretty sure that shit would have happened whether or not NATO was there. Like NATO just happened to be the organization that did it, you know? Otherwise it would have just been Britain, France, Italy. Like it just would have been the countries that are a part of NATO. The main thing that NATO does, the explicit thing that NATO does, is it serves as a military bulwark against Russian aggression. And there are countries that genuinely benefit from that. And I just
why are
don't
so
think the
many
harm
countries that
outweighs,
are not bordering Russia part of it? Like I think
because they
that's
want to be a part of the hegemon.
that's like we should be shouldn't we not support the strengthening hegemons? Like wouldn't it be better to have less hegemonic, less hegemonic powers or less powerful
Would you have ever
hegemons?
said this when it comes to like Bolivia siding with Russia or something? Like no, like always. No, I'm in favor of a unipolar world. I am not in favor of like a thousand fragmented countries, all with like no alliances or trade. I want every country to be bound to every other country. You know, I want there to
That's
be one
different.
pole,
Every
and the
country
pole is the
being
whole
bound to
world.
every other country is different from a bunch of countries being bound to one big country. I think those are very distinct.
I don't
Like
care. Let every country be subservient to America. If every country is subservient to America, then no one will be, because there will no longer be an external non-hegemonic power sphere to bully in favor of our own hegemonic power sphere. I don't believe in this like multi-polarity. I don't think it's been beneficial. I'm totally fine with NATO being the dominant military power. Let's be real. NATO contains within it the combined military power to wipe out the planet and the moon and also Mars for like, you know, for good measure. With all that power, what has NATO done? Like, we intervened in Libya. There were the bombings in under Clinton. Like, okay, like it's all the power in the world. I mean, Article 5 was invoked with Afghanistan. They sent all of like 10 troops in with us to Afghanistan. You know, like it seems like if NATO was such a nefarious organization, if it was so, you know, militarily coercive, it would probably be more than what it is, which is just like a wall against Russia. It just
I
doesn't seem
think,
like it's as
for
harmful, but lefties
example,
make it out like it's this evil.
NATO reduces, for example, like the cost for military action, like unified military action, like military coordination has like a cost to it. And I think NATO reduces that cost, which makes it easier and more likely for coordinated military action to happen, which is, I would say, generally bad since lots of it is not defensive. And like everyone says that
Well,
all,
like what?
everyone justifies all military action as like I think like Libya, for example, like that was like I think the and like coordination costs were reduced by NATO, which meant there was
Good.
more.
Libya should have been a part of NATO to begin with, and it wouldn't have happened.
Libya would not have been admitted into NATO.
Yeah, it should
What?
have been a part of NATO. We should have gotten Libya into NATO way earlier. Yeah.
What? How? What? It was.
However, any means necessary. Okay, we would have found a way.
What does that mean?
It means that what happened in first of all, if we're talking about how many people died in Libya, how much of that was because of NATO involvement, and how much of that was because of the Second Revolution? If you take a look at how many people died and the reasons why they died and what led to what conditions, like NATO involvement is like a paltry fraction of like the total harm done there. You know, like if Libya had been considered a component, like a part of the broader hegemon earlier, maybe we would have invested in them. See, NATO
Well,
only wants to include.
We wouldn't have included NATO under the government had. Like it was not. It's not. Like it was not. We wouldn't.
Yeah, but
I don't think it
that's the
would.
point. NATO is a stabilizing force. Countries can't join NATO if they have an internal revolution, if there's civil conflict. They also have to adhere to certain civic requirements, you know? If the more countries are a part of NATO, the more there's a very basic baseline expectation of stability, which might have prevented stuff like the fucking Libyan Second Civil War, you know? The same is the case with countries that are currently in NATO, you know? Like right now, okay? Like a country, like I don't think very highly of Poland, for example, you know? Like I don't think highly of its politics, but I think that Poland, as long as it's a part of NATO, is going to be a stable country. I feel the same way about all the countries that are in NATO, because NATO is a stabilizing force. It's a military framework that is denied to them the moment they get too topsy-turvy to keep themselves together. And that is a benefit of unipolarity, by the way. Hey, you get this military stability, you get this defense, this safety from a mostly American-backed NATO organization. But in return, you can't have any crazy revolution bullshit going on. You know, you don't get any coup de grace. You don't get any, like, juntas, or however they're pronounced. You know, you don't get those. Because if you try for them, you lose the only thing preventing the rest of the world from fixing you out. In a way, that implicit threat is actually a really strong stabilizing force. And it's one of the reasons why I don't I don't really take issue with, like, the concept of NATO. Coup d'etat?
Right.
Didn't I say that?
Right.
Did I say
coup de grace? Right.
Did I say coup de grace? Oh, like Mardi Gras. Oh, haha. Coup d'etat. Thank you. Yeah. I don't know. I just, yeah, I feel like it's
I think it's a little bit like you have to be kind of like you have to be kind of stable to join NATO in the first place. It's a little bit strange to say the stabilizing force when if you're unstable you can't join. So like kind of by definition, every country in NATO is going to be more stable because like you have to be more.
But countries can be unstable in the future, right? So maybe it stabilizes them for the future. Maybe right now they're stable, but in 20 years they wouldn't be. And the presence of NATO maybe keeps them a little bit together. You can't deny that countries that join, like, you can't deny that NATO has been like a wave of stabilization over Eastern Europe, right? Like, as we take a look at all these countries joining NATO, like, they straighten their shit out because they want to be a part of NATO. Like, that's a huge part of it. Like, these countries have literally, like, made an effort to straighten themselves out, to resolve internal disputes, to become, like, more politically and economically decent, so they're good enough for NATO. Like, they're working hard to be worthy of NATO membership.
I think apart for a few countries, it's economic alignment pushing that more than military alignment.
Well, sure. Who wouldn't want to be economically aligned with Europe?
That's I think the difference. I think it's that's not NATO being a stabilizing force so much as the European economic trading bloc being a stabilizing force.
Sure, but they also do work for NATO membership.
But I think that the economic alignment is basically the carrot.
Well, I'm fine with that too. Shouldn't those countries get a chance to provide their citizens better lives through the wealth of the EU?
Also, when you say, I guess, stabilizing, like, I think part of the issue with that thing is that being basically backed by NATO allows you to take riskier actions because you're more backed up. Like, Turkey can do more aggressive action in the Middle East because it knows it's relatively it can't be retaliated against. That's like
retaliated against by who?
But by basically anyone, like it's part of NATO, like Article 5. Like if it expands, if it gets too aggressive with Syria, gets too aggressive against the Kurds and stuff, if it expands too aggressively, like if it takes too aggressive action, like there can never be any return threat that's significant because then they can just invoke Article 5 and it allows that allows them to stabilize them in the sense that it makes them more secure in their aggression.
I get that. It's just that Turkey has a very large military. Like, what fights are they picking that they wouldn't be able to pick without being a part of NATO?
I think I think, for example, it's overextend more because they can focus the military more on taking aggressive action because they're basically secure 100 they're totally secure from defense. And I think Turkey is a big military.
Well, hold on. You didn't answer my question there, right? Like, Turkey has a very big military. I'm pretty sure the fights that Turkey picks at the moment, their involvement in the Middle East, I'm pretty sure they could handle themselves without NATO. Also, even if Turkey didn't want to be a part of NATO, NATO would want Turkey to be a part of NATO. because
No,
they control access to the
I
Black
think
Sea.
Turkey wants to be part of NATO because it allows it to be more aggressive because it knows it can't be retaliated against.
Oh, right. I'm just saying that for one, like NATO would want Turkey anyway. That would be the case no matter what. But like, what fights are they picking that they wouldn't be able to pick if they weren't a part of NATO? Because it's not as though NATO troops are like being deployed by Turkey to go fight their battles for them. You know, obviously they're using their own military, but like.
Sure, but the claim is that they can't be. It's like you say about the military alliances. The degree of retaliation is limited because
But by
because
who?
any severe
Retaliation by
retaliation.
who?
But like the all the conflicts engaged the region, like for like I don't know Syria for example, they were never engaged there for until
Okay, what is Syria going to do to mount an invasion on Turkey that they are now not able to do because of NATO? Like, the problem is the countries that Turkey, like, bullies are not countries that could do anything to Turkey anyway. Like, what, like, it's
right, like it doesn't actually like the Afghanistan had Article 5 invoked, and that was like that's also like this like it doesn't need to be.
And
It
that
just
was
means like
bullshit, but that proves my point, because America could have handled Afghanistan on its own. NATO was just a virtue signal. We didn't need NATO. Like, it's not like we couldn't have handled Afghanistan unless NATO was there, right? Like, we were perfectly capable of doing that one on our own. That was just like a rallying cry. In no material way did the existence of NATO contribute to the invasion or, like, lead to, lead to any problems there. And likewise with, like, like Syria. Like, I don't think Turkey being a part of NATO increases or decreases the likelihood of Syria mounting a counteroffensive because, it's Syria, right? It's not going to happen.
I think there are both degrees of like ability to. I don't think Turkey. I think Turkey's strong, like strong in the region. But I think it's like overall. I think they could benefit from NATO like arms, intelligence groups if it needed to. And additionally, I think the Article 5 prevents diplomatic action. Like it would be. It was more difficult for countries to take a stance against the U.S. Its invasion of Afghanistan because of the alliance. Means that even if they like it means that they're basically like it's difficult to take a less interventionist diplomatic stance because of the Article 5 and
Um,
NATO's an alliance generally.
I don't.
Like it's hard to condemn with Article 5. It's hard to condemn a country for as much as you would want to, necessarily potentially would want to because of the treaty in place.
I mean, that's just kind of an outcome of military alliances, isn't it? But the same thing clearly would have happened without NATO because our invasion of Iraq didn't involve an invocation of Article 5, and countries from Europe still joined in and defended us. Like, the invasion of Iraq was initially...
And I think we got more pushback. I think not we, like US, got more pushback from countries in Iraq than Afghanistan. Obviously,
Well,
there's other reasons for that. I
wasn't
think
right
part of
after
that is that
9/11, right?
yeah, there's other reasons. I think it's more. I don't know. They're both pretty egregious.
And countries like gin up propaganda to defend each other in a sort of like geopolitical hegemon defending way anyway. I guess the issue we're running into here is that a lot of the negative externalities you're referring to aren't really externalities. They're just an inherent part of countries having similar interests. And something like NATO, for most countries, for America, UK, Germany, France, and others, NATO is a formality. Without NATO, we would, like, all the same shit would happen. Like NATO doesn't change a goddamn thing. We're ride or die with them. They're ride or die with us. They get invaded. We're going to war. We get invaded. They're going to war. It's not changing. The only place where NATO makes a real difference is countries that border Russia or that otherwise face a threat of Russian aggression. I feel like most of the bad stuff surrounding NATO just would have happened anyway, but I do know that the fact that Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania are a part of NATO has prevented Russian aggression there. I would bet you anything that if they weren't a part of NATO, Russia would have aggressed in them much more than they have in this timeline, So in that respect, it seems like the bad stuff around NATO is stuff that would have happened anyway, and the good stuff around NATO is stuff that definitely would not have happened
Like,
anyway.
what is Croatia getting out of NATO? Like, I disagree. Like, I think there are countries
I
there are
don't know.
countries that
That's
are
up
not
to
the main
them.
countries.
That's up to them. I don't have to make their arguments for them. If they wanted to join NATO, that's their right.
Like, I guess I don't know why. Like right is relevant when aren't these like normative claims? Are we both making normative claims about? Aren't most of the claims we're making normative claims? Like, I don't know what like right has to do.
I think countries have a right to join strategic alliances that they feel benefits them. Now, if those strategic alignments are harmful, then we can make arguments against that. But in this case, I don't think it is. I think that the bad stuff surrounding NATO probably would have happened anyway, and the good stuff surrounding NATO happened specifically because of NATO. So,
They have to pay into. They have to make pay into NATO. Like they have to prepare like a certain percentage of GDP on defense spending, and they have to potentially send troops. But that's harmful. Like you said, it's just harmful. I think it's harmful. Like it's.
But they choose to. That's their choice. They made the choice to. They think that's worth it if it means getting the benefit of our like incredible defensive arc.
But like I don't know, countries choose all kinds of things. Like isn't the whole point like most of the claims you make, for example, I assume are like
it's their choice to. If countries are going to pursue their strategic interests, and if they're willing to shell out 2% of their GDP on military spending, which is not a lot, by the way, NATO's requirements are not that high. If they're willing to do that in exchange for being a part of the strongest military alliance in the history of humanity, like that seems like a pretty it's just not that surprising to me that they would go for it. I don't think they need to be bullied into it. Like historically, countries have clamored for it. They want desperately to be a part of NATO, and who could blame them?
I mean, when the country choosing, like you can criticize the choice the country makes as thing like that can be wrong, right? Like presumably most countries make economic decisions that you think are bad for them, like not just like
I don't think, I think it's good for them. I think being a part of NATO is a really good decision on like every possible level. Like it means that you're part of the most powerful political hegemon on earth. It means that you are uninvadable. You cannot be invaded. If you're a part of NATO, congratulations, your borders are remaining stable for as long as NATO does. It means that countries that are as powerful as America have a direct investment in your political stability, which means that people care about stuff like your currency, the strength of your currency, the likelihood of you like continuing to invest mutually in these countries. It makes it, like there's so much built into it that's good for them. Like, it's like joining the EU, right? Like they're separate. Obviously there's an overlap between NATO and EU because like geographically, they're in the same area, but it's like, yeah, like sure, maybe it bolsters the power of some hegemons, but it's good for you. Like it's good to be a part of the EU. It's good to be a part of NATO, in my opinion.
like I guess I don't think it's like I think a lot of countries it's not good for them, and like you say it's not your reason to justify. Like as a confusing would say, it's not your reason to justify, but I'll say it's good for them. Like I guess those feel like those contradictory. Like either you think it's good for them, or you think if they have a right to, and it doesn't matter what it is because it's a right. But I don't know how this can both be. Like I don't know how it can be good for them without having specific. Like I guess without
countries are going to pursue their geopolitical interests, and I think this is in their geopolitical interest. And I don't think it's harmful. I think both are true. Like, for example, other countries can pass laws that I disagree with, and I can simultaneously think that they're bad and also think they have a right to pass them, I don't like the UK's gun laws, but I think they have a right to have those because I believe in democracy. I don't believe that my will should just be projected to the whole world. I believe in the democratic process. If their democracy leads to those outcomes, then I think that's fine. But in this case, I don't disagree with their choice to join NATO. I want more countries to join NATO. I think that'd be good. I just don't think
other parts of it was like, for example, what about the military aid Turkey gets as part of NATO?
What about the what?
That they use to the military aid Turkey receives as part of NATO that they then use pretty aggressively. Like that's a pretty unequivocal.
Okay.
That's in my view a pretty unequivocally bad bad element of NATO. Like that's a downside. Like that's a negative trait.
We
Like
sell,
if more countries are part of NATO, we would give more arms to more countries to do more,
but we sell
military
weapons to
actions.
Saudi Arabia. I don't care
That's
about
also
NATO.
bad.
That
US,
is
those are both bad.
okay.
Like
Yeah.
I don't know. We could agree
Okay.
those
Wait.
both
Stop.
bad.
Wait. Hold on. I agree. It is bad that we give weapons to Saudi Arabia. But I'm just saying, doesn't that kind of indicate that whether or not a country is a part of NATO, American weapons are going to make their way over there if people there are buying? That's my point. Like, again, this is one of those bad things surrounding NATO that I think would happen with or without NATO. America trades weapons to people all over the world. I don't think, like, if you remove Turkey from NATO, I don't think they're suddenly going to, like, run out of equipment to conduct their military, engagements with. I think that the what they get from NATO is just like a sweet bonus they're happy to make use of. But I think that they would still do it either way. I just don't think
I
we
think they would
enable
get.
them.
They would get. I think they would get less if they were not part of NATO.
I
I
think
think
the
that's like.
destruction they wreak would be essentially the same as what takes place now. I don't think that we're like facilitating or allowing for their military engagement, At the worst we're enabling it, but even then I don't think we're enabling it in a way which it wouldn't be possible at all if they weren't part of NATO.
I think being part of NATO generally gives access to countries to better weapons than they would get outside of NATO and
Well,
like
that's
more
the
weapons. And I
point,
think that's
yeah.
good. Yeah, but better weapons. I think you don't think you don't think the quality of like the weapons, the garments is like matters. I think it has better at least somewhat. Obviously, Turkey thinks it matters. Otherwise, they wouldn't like
Well,
I
yeah,
don't know. I guess
but
the
that's
sense that
that's
like
a military alliance. Yeah, I mean, that's just gonna happen.
I guess your claim was I thought didn't you just say that like it would be just it would be the same no matter what like it would be the same regardless.
With Turkey's military, I'm confident they could do basically whatever they want in the Middle East without without any like assistance from NATO. Yeah.
Was there any difference in your view between giving a country the more advanced versus less advanced weapons?
I don't think it matters because we give weapons to non-NATO countries. We give weapons to plenty of countries in like Asia. Like again, like I just think this would happen either way.
I think there's generally a greater number of more advanced weapons given to NATO members than non-NATO members, even when we do even when the
We
U.S.
give super
has.
advanced weapons to like South Korea and shit, and like Saudi Arabia too. Like they get incredibly high quality military equipment. It's not like we're only reserved. Again, like we're so many layers deep on speculation right now. Like the idea that like NATO arms are what allow for Turkey to do what they do, and that they wouldn't just do the same without them, and that also we wouldn't just sell them arms anyway because we do to countries all over the world, and like we're like so far deep. I have to ask you, like, what, like, it just seems like your like starting position is that like NATO is bad, and like everything after that is like a post hoc justification. Again, keep in mind, like, I'm not ideologically pro NATO. I don't care about this gusto American bravado bullshit or whatever. I don't like America being in charge of the whole fucking developed world or whatever, That's not my point. My point is like it's just not a big deal. Like the shit that NATO does that's bad is so paltry and insignificant, and it's only, in my opinion, it's only because of Russian propaganda that we even pay attention to it. Like, it's really obvious when you look at the world that the IMF and the World Bank are the agents of real American imperialism. That the harm they do is, like, incalculably worse than like, this perceived harm from NATO, which I just don't think really is there at all, even if it is a big deal. Like but for some reason, like it's like NATO aggression, like NATO imperialism, which is made up, and like who benefits from this? Only Russia. As far as I can tell, the only country that's actually hurt by NATO is Russia, and that's because Russia wants to be able to do whatever the fuck it wants with the neighboring countries. And I guess I would have less of an issue with this discussion if it didn't feel like I'm being gaslit 24/7 by lefties who are trying to convince me that NATO is like somehow secretly, in spite of all the evidence, like secretly it's actually like the vanguard of Western imperialism or whatever, as though Western imperialism is something that's happening right now in Eastern Europe. Like that's where Western imperialism is doing its bit the most, Like maybe for Russia, sure.
I mean, it's not happening there. I don't know. It's like pretty clearly like if you go there, it's like I don't know. I think it's
The
corrupt. Like it's
countries
not.
there want to be a part of our, like, it's no, no, no. Eastern Europe is a part of the imperial core. We're not talking about like Bangladesh or whatever, where the IMF runs over and they're like,
I
hey,
think
pay
it's a
everyone
little
3 cents a
silly to
day.
say Eastern Europe is part of the imperial
They're
core. To be
going to
honest,
be. We're working on it. Like the Western Europe wants them to be. It's pretty obvious over the past couple
uh,
of decades that a deliberate effort has been made to try to bring Central and Eastern Europe up to par so that they can be like part of this massive, like the most powerful trading bloc in the world, like broader Europe, you know? It's
that's
like,
still not the imperial core. Like they just
nah,
also
it's
make up
not
a
like
huge portion of labor
Bangladesh.
forces in other
It's not like
countries.
Cambodia. It's not like I reject that. I like they
I
are
feel like
they're
there are.
part of the imperial core. At least efforts are being made to raise them up, and it's like basically just because of the Soviet Union that they're not. Like let's be real. Like they got economically fucked by the Soviet Union for decades, and they were
What?
super fucking corrupt after the Cold War ended.
Yugoslavia was like deeply like screwed over by the West.
I'm
Like
talking about Eastern Central Europe broadly. They were our enemies. Of course Yugoslavia got screwed over by us. They could have just like
Yugoslavia was
I'm
like
not
kind
sure.
of allied. It depends on the situation. Like I don't know. I think it's
They
like weird
play
to say
both
like I
sides.
understand it's not. It's like specifically like Germany was more involved in the breakup initially, and then U.S. got involved after once it became uh
Yeah, I just
once
like
it progressed.
it seems like like when I think of the imperial core compared to the imperial periphery, right? The imperial periphery, as I understand it, are countries where deliberate efforts are made by the imperial core to structure their economy and civics in such a way as to make them amenable for Western business investment so that their
That happened in
labor,
Eastern Europe.
hold on,
Okay, that
their labor and raw resources can be exploited at relatively low costs by the more technologically developed Western powers. Now, it has happened, though, by the way, if you want to take a look at who's done that most in Eastern Europe, it's the Soviet Union, not us. But that has happened over there. But if you take a look at EU investment and like what's been going on in the past couple of decades, I think it's pretty clear, okay? Like the EU does not want like the Baltic countries to be like farms and like sweatshops. It's pretty obvious that an effort is being made to modernize these countries economically. Like Estonia is not like some backwater, you know, like they're not living in like these ramshackle tenements and like the economic product of their country is some raw resource they're extracting, you know? Like an effort is being made. I think people in Western Europe want Eastern Europe to get on board, you know? And the
I mean,
biggest threat to that right now is fucking Russia. They're the biggest threat to that because Russia doesn't want that because it would be to our benefit.
think if you went outside like the Balkans or like in Germany, you'd see like or like England, for example, like they clearly do use the Eastern Europe as a labor force, a cheaper labor force. They clearly did restructure the economies to be more amenable to Western interests. Like I don't know, like I guess it's just I'll get back to my thoughts. Just a little bit. I guess it's a little insane for me to hear someone say like the Eastern Europe is like part of the imperial core. I'm sorry.
Well, compared to countries like with sweatshops in them, yeah, I would certainly say so. I'd say there's a pretty
Well,
huge difference.
there's gotta be a difference, but there's gotta be somewhere between Bangladesh and the imperial core. Like
Well,
I
like,
kind of
but like,
like.
what are we trying to do right now with like the Eastern Europe? It seems like we're making an effort to try to make them wealthier and more economically productive. As I understand it, Estonia, a very small country, has a thriving tech hub that's growing more and more developed with every passing year. Like, as I understand it, like massive efforts at decorruption and modernization have taken place in Ukraine despite the conflict in the Donbass region. Like, as I understand it, like Poland and Hungary, like massive efforts have been made to invest and not invest like, hey, like lower your prices so we can build sweatshops or whatever. Though keep in mind, all countries that are capitalists do that to other capitalist countries, right? Like America does that to itself, you know, like we try to depress our own wages. But generally speaking, I think that like the intent on bringing all of Europe up to par is pretty clear. It might take a while, don't get me wrong, but I don't think policymakers envision the future of Eastern Europe as being like a resources farm for Western Europe. I think the goal would be to have them both be like developed, technologically acclimated economic powerhouses.
Well, I think there's still a very strong desire to make them some kind of a labor hub. Like I think you have, like say same with Ukraine. if the war goes particularly bad, it'll be the same with Russia. Like I disagree that the Western Europe doesn't have an interest in uh, establishing a kind of like using Eastern Europe uh, to especially the Balkans um, as to be subservient and not part of the imperial court the same way
Well,
Western Europe
what's
is.
the evidence of that? Like, we want Ukraine to be part of the EU. Ukraine wants to be a part of NATO. Like I guess what is the
Yeah, because they'll
evidence?
be part of the EU, so they'll have visa travel. So like you have like you can use like Ukrainian labor like the same way like
Well,
it's like
wait, you can use labor of any people in EU like that. Wait, that's not specific to Ukraine. That's the case for any EU
yeah,
member.
you pick poor countries though. Like obviously, like it's better economically for you to use poor countries. The labor is the poor countries because you have more bargaining power over them.
Wait, but the opposite is the case, because oftentimes these countries benefit disproportionately from free travel. Countries like Ukraine have people who are educated there, and then they head to countries like the UK or France or Germany or whatever, where they send remittances from their relatively higher pay back over to their home country. The same thing happens with Mexico. Like the ability for them to travel freely between borders and exchange labor, like being a part of the EU, that is a massive benefit to Ukraine economically. You would never do that with a country that you wanted to remain like in the economic outskirts.
I think you can do that without wanting your country to like wanting the one country to be part of the imperial core. I think it's I see
But
like
we're making them. I want them to be a part of the. Well, I don't want any imperialism at all, of course. But as long as we have, as long as we're talking about the well-being of Eastern Europe, like why not? Why like it would it not benefit the EU to have them in that? Like, why admit them into the EU if they're just going to be like sweatshop farms? Like that's being a part of the EU seems to be like preempting a structure for broader economic development.
the EU gives like certain countries a lot of input, power, control, influence over those countries. Like Germany benefits like a lot from like the fact that it basically like dominates the EU. Like I think it's like and in terms of like the restructuring stuff like that did happen. Like the Eastern Europe was restructured to be amenable to Western interests. Like very directly. Like
But it's
I
to
guess it's
their interest as well. Somebody in chat is saying apparently Poland has a 95% approval of the EU because of how much the EU invests in Poland. Like these countries want to be a part of the EU. It's their way out. Being a part of like the biggest trade bloc in the world, or one of them at least, is good for these countries. Like I just don't understand. Like with the NATO, the EU,
no,
like these countries
I
want
don't
to
think
be a
the
part.
EU is like inherently terrible, but I just don't think it's a sign. I just don't think it means that that they're trying to like the goal is to make those countries part of the imperial core.
Then to like what? Like what okay. Imagine you're in like the dark room where everyone's smoking cigars of like Western hegemony. Okay. What level of development do you think they want like Ukraine to end up at?
Uh, like like some like I mean the ideal state like the one that benefited the most from was when they redid the restructuring. Like IMF funds, including IMF funds and stuff. Like it's
Hold on,
like is when you want you.
please, a little slower.
Sorry. I'm like very ADHD. Uh, like the most like the benefit the most, including like the more like the obvious IMF loan, like the stuff you agree is imperialism IMF loans, is when they used like they wanted a very when they relied on an educated, they wanted the people to be extremely educated outside the country, and they can import highly educated workers without having to pay the cost of educating their citizens, like paying the they offloaded the costs of producing educated workers onto these four other countries, and it gets to import them as for cheaper labor.
But like what relative level of development, right? Like Estonia already seems to be like pretty clearly headed towards a tech-oriented economy, and it seems like they've been pretty successful. So like I guess if the EU wanted Estonia
I
to
think
just be a
it's
sweatshop farm, they
Baltics and
failed.
Finland. I think the Baltics and Finland are not are relatively oriented, like pretty heavily differently than other parts of Eastern Europe.
Wait,
Uh,
why? I think the Baltics should be subject to the same level of post-Soviet discrimination as Ukraine. It's not as though the Baltics were like uniquely. I mean, like if we wanted to make Ukraine economically subservient, why wouldn't we the same with them?
I guess I'm not like I'm not too educated on I'm like the Balkans where I am. I'm like basically aware of. Like, I'm not like I don't have too much like I haven't like like, looked into the Baltics particularly have like in detail. But it's like pretty obvious that they have a differently oriented like economy situation. Like I feel like they're kind of incomparable.
I just don't understand like why. Like you have two geopolitical powers right now, Russia and like all of NATO and the U.S. Right, and like Russia explicitly wants to invade and annex Ukraine. The Russian and USSR occupation of Ukraine has been nothing but disastrous for the past century.
But the USSR occupation of Ukraine was not like I wouldn't say it was disastrous. Like
I'd say
it
it was
clearly
a
influenced
little
development there.
disastery between all the starving people and the political suppression and the
I mean,
everything.
the starving people was I think basically like a requirement for the industrialization, the speed, which ended up adding World War II. I don't know. It's debatable
Ooh.
whether.
There is no evidence that the Holodomor was a necessary component of industrialization whatsoever. The Soviet Union was maintaining a net grain export while 6 million people starved to death in the
Yeah,
the
to
West
pay for
Soviet Union.
industrialization. Like
Okay, how do you feel about a country that's like, oh, no prob, let's meet the bill. Let's just let 6 million of our people starve to death so we can afford to industrialize faster. You know they can run a national debt, right? Like we do it.
and then I don't know if they could have
They
done that.
can.
I don't. The Soviet Union at the time would have been able to industrialize the national debt. I just don't know if that's true.
You can put it on the bill. In my mind personally, if I'm thinking, we only have so much money.
They had no money. They had grain. What?
We could maybe we can let's see. We can industrialize it and kill millions of people, or we could not. Like there was a
Yeah,
Holocaust level of death. Like, do you think
but
that's
they were.
acceptable on a spreadsheet, like a budget mark?
I think that situation is complicated by the fact that World War II happened and it ended up like the industrialization ended up mattering. I'm saying in a
No,
circumstance.
no,
I
no,
think
no, no, no. You're literally justifying a Holocaust tier death count for economic. Like, are you kidding? Like earlier, you're very concerned over like Turkish involvement in the Middle East, and it's like, oh, well, hey, it was only like 7 million people who starved to death, right? Like, you know, like really, like this is what I mean. Like,
how would they have won World War II without industrializing?
first of all, you don't get to kill millions of people beforehand because you might need to fight a conflict in the future. Second of all, you have no evidence that starving those millions of people by maintaining a grain export was necessary for them to build up those defenses. Third of all, we know for a fact that a huge portion of the Holodomor wasn't actually caused by economic forces, but by Stalin deliberately starving out those people as a way of punishing them for Ukrainian nationalism, which is why
I don't know if there's a strong. I don't know if there's a strong like. I'm not
anti-Kulak and anti-Ukrainian propaganda was being produced by the Kremlin back during the Holodomor. Why would you produce anti-ethnic group propaganda while also those people are
Kulaks are
starving?
an ethnic group. Like,
If you don't think there was an... Wait, hold on. Wait. Hold on. There was absolutely a massive ethnic component to the condemnation of the kulaks and the broader behavior of the Soviet Union in Ukraine.
Can you let me... I would like to try to at least present what I'm understanding.
I haven't finished listing all the ways in which what you're saying is wrong. Like, I got to
sure,
three.
I just want to mention, like, the ethnic... I want to mention the ethnic thing, but I want to preface it with, like... I would like to be at least heard out. I don't think I'm a tanky. I don't want to get, like...
Well, wait, defending the Holodomor is pretty, like, tanky shit. Okay, saying they needed to do it to, like, later fight off the Nazis.
I don't know if they needed to do it. I'm just saying, like, I think it's more complicated. I just think these are a little more complicated than people say.
How could you possibly... You realize, like, the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan could have happened 30 times over and we wouldn't have killed as many people as the Holodomor, right? Like, how can you ever clutch your pearls at any bad thing the U.S. has ever done? We've never racked up a death count like that. Not once.
This is World War II. I don't know. I just changes. I just, like... Also, I also like. I'm not saying it's like good. I think it was probably still not bad. I just think people. First of all, I think the ethnic component is
No,
overstated.
you
Like,
have to you have to understand. Like, you would never say any of this about conflicts which led to 1,000th of the number of deaths. Like this is the problem. This is what I mean by like gaslighting. You know what I mean? It's like I'm supposed to believe that you're not like I hear this stuff from Nazis, right? Like, you know, oh yeah, the Holocaust was bad. I'm not defending it, but and then they go on to be really concerned with the firebombing of Dresden or whatever. Like it's very obvious when you disproportionately condemn different historical events. Like, and this whole time, like NATO's the thing that you're after.
I guess
NATO.
I
And then
guess
it's like,
I'm
oh,
not
the
saying
Holodomor, well, you know, maybe they needed that. Like, do you have
I'm
evidence
not
of that?
pro the whole door, but like I have
You're
some evidence.
defending
I
it.
like
This
to.
is apologia.
I just, I know it sounds bad. Can I just at least have a chance to say what like basic? Can you still hear me? Sorry.
I can hear you.
My computer's. I guess I'm responding. I get to what I hear. Like I think like for example I don't think I'm like total like extremist in either of these things. I'm not saying NATO is like the worst thing ever. Like and shouldn't exist at all. Like in any form. Like would be like the worst thing ever. I don't think like the whole drama was good. I hear a lot of people, for example, mention things. I don't see a lot of like the intentionality, like the ethnic intentionality. Like we have the archives now, and I just like I looked through those, and I people like, repeat this a lot, and I don't see a lot of like evidence for the like that part of the intentionality. So it's like it's not like a vacuum pushback. I feel like it's contextual within the environment that I hear like
You
I just
have
think
to
this should be
do you
more
do you
accurate take.
understand for how, from my perspective, like leaving aside the factual inaccuracies, like do you understand how, from my perspective, I'm talking to you for about an hour and a half, where you're very concerned with the negative outcomes of NATO, in which the examples you're providing are things which usually have death counts in the triple or maybe low quadruple digits, and then casually, when the Holodomor is brought up while talking about Ukraine, which led to millions of people dying, the first thing you say is a defense of it. Which is what it was, by the way. That the first thing you did was list out a number of defenses. Okay, from my
I guess
perspective, can you understand how when you
sure.
seem
I guess my
outraged at alliances and that's what you like instantly like?
I guess my perspective on this is that I'm just I guess I'm trying to move towards like if I saw someone like different like defending the Holodomor more than I would, I feel like I would push back in that direction. I just feel like if from my perspective, I'm just trying to
See, but
I
now it
give
just
them that
feels
I
to me
think
like you don't actually
frequently.
care about NATO and it's just like a Russia simping thing. Like this is what I mean. Like
I'm not. I don't feel like I'm not a Russia simp. I'm not like. I
okay,
don't think I have anything like
like
Russia.
Holodomor apologia is like top tier like Russia simp though.
I guess I don't know if it's like apology. Like if there was a if someone made a factually inaccurate from your perspective, obviously like factually inaccurate statement about the USA, and you would you correct them if they like they said for example let's say they said the USA
You
they said
like
a bad thing the USA did but it was
I
worse
didn't
than
say
it was.
anything that was factually inaccurate for one.
Sure.
But like additionally, like no. I think you've been saying plenty of things throughout this conversation that I don't think have been on the point factually. It's very obvious where your sentiments lie. This is just more like standard America bad shit or like USSR good or whatever. Look,
Look,
please. You're like panicking to defend yourself, but you're digging a hole deeper. Like it's just there's no context in which a conversation where we've been straining this level of credulity to get upset over these marginal problems can then be met with casual defense of the Holodomor and then like, oh well, like let me explain why. Like no, just
okay.
right now,
what would non-casual defense look like? Sorry, I'll let you finish.
Because 99% of people who defend genocides don't say it was a good thing. They just like do apologia for it. You realize most neo-Nazis don't defend the Holocaust, right? They just engage in apologia for it. They downplay the number of people who died. They say that it was an accident. They say that it was grain shortages that were caused by Allied bombings of train yards. They do everything they can to like throw it under the rug. And they're like, oh, well, I'm not defending the Holocaust. I've just looked at the evidence and it seems like a lot of people have factually inaccurate claims when they make like, and all this after like the NATO stuff, like, you know?
I guess I know it's gonna sound sus. I'd cheer me out. Like, I guess if you had, like, what would be the? Is there any way I could bring up that point without being like you saying that's what Nazis sound like? Like, I feel like there's basically
your response
nothing
right now was just I'm just asking questions, which is also the thing.
No, it's not.
Say,
Okay,
so.
basically, I'm looking from like I don't know. If you know the book Let History Judge.
I have not read that book.
I think it's a critique of Stalinism. I think it's not a tanky book in my opinion, and I guess like that's like what my main source here, and I guess I just like I'm
Okay,
not
well
sure
then,
how
okay,
I can make
then
the
I will.
critique without being like said you're not to tanky or whatever. You know, like I guess I don't know
Then
what way I could have
I will
brought it
then.
up other than not bringing it up that would have made it so I wouldn't get criticism.
Well,
Otherwise, like
keep in mind, all I said was all the people starving in Ukraine as evidence to them not benefiting from USSR occupation, which I just don't think you had to say anything to that. I think you could have just let
I
that one
guess
go. But like, if you
yeah,
want
you're
to,
right.
you can look into it further. And as far as I understand it, and I haven't done this evidentiary, discovery for a while, but as far as I understand it, the evidence stands that the Holodomor was completely preventable and completely unnecessary. That a huge part of it was a deliberate neglect from the state as a way of punishing Ukrainian nationalists. That Stalin was perpetually terrified of the ethnic and national constituencies that made together the not always totally working together Soviet Union, like fracturing and falling apart. And after the whole kulak business, he really, really, really wanted to cut down on that. Because keep in mind, like, kulaks didn't do what they did for funsies, They were legitimately being oppressed by the Russian or by the Soviet Union, and they were protesting against it. You can have disagreements with how they did their protests if you want, that's fine. But they were protesting against legitimate problems with the Soviet state, and in
They were also
response,
doing things like I guess like
yes,
right like
I'm
moving
not
there
saying they were perfect actors. I'm only
for
saying
that.
that in response to their protests, Stalin did want to cut down on any chance of a Ukrainian uprising. So he broke Ukraine, and he, through policy and through neglect, deliberately allowed for millions of people to starve to death. It wasn't just bureaucratic incompetence; it was deliberate neglect. It was something. It was something he was deliberately aiming for.
I I agree that it was like some parts of it were more intentional, like or were like intentional. But I guess the way I've presented, like I've done, I think I did a lot of reading on this. I've read, I looked through the archives, I read a few books on it, I looked at pretty detail, and like for instance, like it's like for like, and so I feel like I have, I guess I could do more research, but I feel like you get this too. Like if somebody tells you to do more research, you've done the research, you can always do more research. But I guess at what point do you just like feel confident with what you read? Like how you like do that? Like I
Um,
guess because I feel like I read a lot. Like
with
these, I don't know.
with post-Soviet stuff, it's really complicated. The archives themselves are never that much of a reliable source because the Soviet Union was notoriously dishonest and unreliable with their internal record
I
keeping.
guess, but I think it's a little. I guess I don't know. I feel like there's like there are extremely detailed archives on the terror, right? Like I guess I'll say that
I
like
haven't read all the
the
archives, so I
terror
can't speak to all of
have
them.
been were very very detailed, and it'd be weird for it seems to be weird for like the Soviets to keep extremely detailed records on an unequivocally really terrible thing, and then uh get rid of every single record over the intentional like the
Wait, why would they?
the kind
Wait,
of
why would they keep?
intentionality.
Why would they keep records giving evidence that their leader was deliberately killing millions of their own people? You realize,
Why
like,
would they
there.
keep records of the terror?
You realize there's no official order to commit the Holocaust from Hitler, right?
Yeah,
Like,
and
that was never
but there's
written down.
like we don't have, but there's like in my opinion, the terror is comparable, and we don't have records of like we have records of that. So like, why would like I would
Okay,
for what I
but
understand from Liberty Germany, we don't have a discrepancy there.
okay, wait, hold on. What you're talking about right now are records of, like, state brutalization and policing. You realize that with regards to, like, the punishments they would directly enact, they would, like, they would have their trials and records because part of the pretense of the terror was them, like, formalizing these legal proceedings against political dissidents. The whole point of, like, the purges wasn't that it was just the state randomly killing people. It was that the state was finding evidence of all of these traitors and counter-revolutionaries in their midst, bringing them to trial and executing them justly under the Revolutionary Council. The aesthetic, the mechanism through their terror was something which they documented. But if you look through that, you're not going to find them recording evidence of them making it up. That's the thing. If you could read through Soviet records, you could believe every word that they were saying. Oh, this person died because they were counter-revolutionary. This person died because they were, selling secrets to the United States. No evidence provided, or falsified evidence provided. The point is that the record keeping is selective. And if you're going to look for something like policies deliberately enacted to kill millions of people in Ukraine, you're not going to find anything like, oh yeah, and then we just didn't give them money and food so they could die. Like, that isn't the type of record keeping that you're going to get from an autocratic state that uses like legal bureaucracy as a mechanism for suppressing its enemies. What you have to look there is you have to look at economic and political analyses of the time. You have to try to...
Sure, but the analysis that seems to make more sense is that they were trying to industrialize, and as part of the industrial, because of conflict factors, there was not enough.
Other countries managed to industrialize without killing millions of their own people.
Not that fast, though.
No,
right?
no, no. You can look in Asia and find countries that have industrialized that fast or faster, more successfully, with fewer deaths and more effectively. Don't buy. This is Soviet propaganda. The idea, like, oh, sure, millions died, but like at least they industrialized super fast. They didn't. The Soviet economy was, even at its peak, unimpressive. They never even came close to us. It was never a multipolar world. Okay.
Oh, I don't disagree there, but I think they did industrialize pretty quickly. I think that is like
not compared to other countries. It was the 20th century.
Which country industrialized? Like,
look at the four Asian tigers. Look at Japan. Look at, like, there were a ton of countries. There are literally countries in Europe. Huh?
Didn't Japan industrialize earlier? Like, it was slower. Like, it was still fast, but it was not the same.
The peaks of their industrialization, there is no evidence that you need to just do mass starvation, especially Russia, the largest country on the planet that had a net grain export at the time. You'd think prioritizing the well-being of your people would be like a good move.
Well, the analysis I read is that they prioritized the urban proletariat over peasant, like the urban population over the peasant population, because their political support was drawn from the urban population disproportionately.
Listen, Russia industrialized at a decent pace and never caught up to Europe. Japan took less time and reached us. Like, the USSR was just not that special. The Soviet Union was just not special. Like, to me, in retrospect, this is like the tanky equivalent of the he made the trains run on time argument. Or there were a lot of people who, like, aren't Nazis, but they'll do this weird, like, Hitler was bad, but he improved their economy type deal. But if you actually look at it, like, first of all, Mussolini did not make the trains run on time. Actually, civic infrastructure suffered under his rule. Hitler did not improve the economy. He just forestalled its collapse with war profiteering. And additionally, the Soviet Union was not economically good. Like, they industrialized like great. Other countries did. Like, the only thing that's really impressive about them is, frankly, they took that long to collapse. Like China, like, look at China. China industrialized rapidly, did it not? At least portions of China. And what were they doing? They're fucking pig iron farmer 5-year plan bullshit. Like, look, industrializing quickly if you're willing to kill millions of your own people is just not impressive to me.
I guess I don't know if it needs to be impressive for it to be like. I guess from what I read, it seems like the industrialization was relatively fast for the time period and the resources they had, and the level of poverty, and I guess, yeah.
What's the point of industrializing if you have to kill millions of your own people? Like, is that acceptable if America was like?
No, I think it's bad, but I think I guess I'm reacting. Maybe it's like the reacting to, like, you know, I think people in the room with you right now, but I feel like in the spaces I'm in, at least, the position is like the Holodomor happened for like no reason. Like, it was just like, Stalin wanted to kill a bunch of people and he did, like, no reason.
Well, yeah.
I feel like that does.
It's the same reason the Irish potato famine happened. Britain could have prevented that from happening. They could have. There were deliberate things. It's the same reason the Bengal famine happened. Britain wanted to curtail Indian nationalism and wanted to prevent them from leaving. And no longer being a colony of Britain. And, Churchill was like, hey, what if we just, like, killed millions of them? You know? Like, wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah, I guess, but from the reading I read, the reasoning is, like, the industrialization reasoning seems has more evidence than the curtailing nationalism reasoning, I guess. That's, like, from the reading I've done. Like, I don't know, it seems like it's stronger argument.
But would you ever go, like, oh, like, the Bengal famine didn't happen for no reason? Like, the UK really wanted to keep India in their empire. Imagine if I brought up the Bengal famine and your response was like, oh, well, hold on. That wasn't done just because he wanted to kill Indian people. He wanted to keep it in the empire, like the English empire. Like,
I could to be honest, imagine that if I was in a social like environment where like there was some, it's kind of weird. I can't imagine it's like actually being like if I guess if the position if I felt like if I felt like if like the mainstream position on the Bengal family was like something, I don't know, I can't think of something, like something really really extreme.
The mainstream position is that
it's
Churchill
bad.
and the England broadly killed them because they wanted to
Yeah,
curtail national sentiment, like nationalist sentiment within
sure.
India,
Like
which is
I
exactly
don't
what
know
I'm said about
too
the
much with the
Holodomor.
details. Sure, but my point is like if I knew about the subject and I felt the mainstream position was, or the common position, at least in the environment I'm in, was extreme. I don't know, went. I was not with the one I had. Sure, I would also probably push back like on
Wait,
that. I
but
don't
the
know. It's like
mainstream position for the Holodomor and for the Bengal famine are the same. That in both
I guess
cases, an imperialist power wanted to maintain control over its holding and didn't want nationalist sentiment in that region to
sure. I
lead to
guess,
them
but from
losing
the reading
control.
I've done, I find the anti-nationalism reading less evidence than the disreport overvaluing urban workers over rural workers while trying to industrialize. Like I don't know. That's just the
Then
evidence
why
I
did
read.
every other country in the world manage to industrialize without starving millions of people to death?
I mean, like isn't the whole like China like meme is that like they did starve
China was
because of
hilariously badly run, legitimately. Like Mao was a fucking retard. Like honest to God, the fact that anyone took Mao seriously as anything other than a military commander is a fucking joke. It's
like I
insane how
guess
stupid revolutionary China was. Legit, like revolutionary China is legit idiocracy tier. If you could go back in time to revolutionary China and you could speak fucking Chinese and you like had a like basic understanding of how the world worked, you could like lead them to the fucking promised
sure.
land.
I agree. I don't think there's. I just like I don't know from the reading I've done like is that the analysis I read, which I don't think is tanky. So like, these are like these people the writers are like all critiques Stalin. They're not Stalinists. Found that like the industrialization I guess the show showed like a
I just think it's time we started treating people who have these interesting countercultural takes on the Soviet Union the same way we treat people who do the same thing for Nazi Germany. We recognize them as what they really are, Nazis who use like a coat of paint of historical revisionism to push like propaganda for their failed empire. And I think it's time we do the same for the USSR. The USSR was a failed fascist state that killed millions of its own people, and hundreds of thousands of people outside of its borders, in an effort to desperately maintain control against the glorious superior political hegemon of the United States. Like it's like, sorry, we do it best, baby. We never killed that many people,
I
except
guess
for
I don't know if it's a
slavery.
very
We did slavery.
particularly
Ignore that.
useful. I mean, no, like, I don't feel. I feel like it's probably you're probably getting a really disproportionate like perspective of me, but I feel like I don't defend the Soviet Union like very much at all. So I sorry, like, I guess. But like, I guess I just like, sometimes. Sorry.
Like, you could defend slavery by your logic. Slavery was more economically necessary to the United States back when we had it than whatever marginal gains not feeding millions of people would have been to industrialization back when the Soviet Union was in that particular kerfuffle. Were the millions of slaves who died, like, worth, like, oh, you know, at least economically it was good? Like it's just, like, why? You know?
I guess I will. I guess I'll do more reading. I guess.
Yeah,
I can't
I'm not trying to
I,
kick into you too hard or whatever. Like, it's legit. Like, go back 3 or 4 years or whatever, and I probably would have agreed with you on a lot of the whataboutism here. This just feeds into my idea that like so many of the disagreements that I have with other people in the online left stems from this like very broad set of like pro-Russian propaganda talking points that keep running into again and again and again.
I guess the other thing is I feel like if you take it's just like more like the tactical thing. I feel like if you take like the the USSR that's really bad stuff and like US obviously I'm not saying like lie or whatever or like the America the number one. I feel like I just think especially internationally it's like they're not a very useful lens. Like that's like more of a tactical concern. But I just think like it's the same with like God. Like I just think it's like not a I just like the last thing I comment on that topic is like I feel like internationally it's like a bad tactic, potentially.
Like the whole American hegemony thing.
Yeah, and
I don't really.
generally,
I don't really. Do you want to know the hard
against...
truth? Lefties will never understand. Okay, nation states are bad. American hegemony is probably like the best one we're going to get right now, and has probably also been, at least over the past century, the best one we've had. Actually, I say easily. Yeah, like America bad, absolutely, but like so is everyone. The main reason we're bad is because of our size and our power, not because we're uniquely bad. We're not.
Sure.
We're actually
I agree with that.
we're uniquely good, or at least liberal democracies are, compared to a lot of other potential hegemons. We're better than China, that's for fucking sure. We're certainly better than Russia.
Sure.
But we should hate America in spite of that. That doesn't mean we should like America. Fuck America. But we have to hate America while recognizing the mountain that America was built atop. Like we can't, like, we should hate America while being aware of the fact that it's also currently the best boat to be on. Because if we can't do that, then we do dumb fuck shit like defending Russia. I'm not saying you did directly here, but a lot of people do directly defend Russia.
I think Russia's bad. I mean, Russia's like, it's capitalist.
It's like a worse boat. It's like an objectively worse boat. But people are like, well, America bad, therefore these other things must be good? Well, no, actually, everything's bad. This is just the less bad. You know? And there's so much of an aesthetic problem because people think, well, that's not a lefty thing to say. I don't give a fuck what the lefty thing to say is. It's true. It's correct.
I just think there are places, I think, that if you say, like, if you go too hard in America, you would just be hit. Like, I don't know, hard. Like, I think it's like, at least some people should understand, like, this tactical. Like, I think, like, going too, like, obviously, like, in the United States, you know, it's, like, probably beneficial to go, like, hard, like, say the USSR was the word, like, terrible and America's the best.
It was. As a leftist, we should be disavowing the USSR harder than any. Listen, okay? In terms of people who hate the USSR, it should be the CIA, and then it should be lefties, okay? Because lefties are, like, shackled to this failed fucking autocratic state, a horrific fucking failure that came... Listen, okay? At its height, the USSR was farther from socialism than America was. I'll stand by it. Like, we're shackled to it forever now because, like, people... Like we can't move past that. Fuck the USSR. I have no... If the USSR is on the road to socialism, then I don't want socialism, and I'm not a socialist.
Sure,
okay?
I guess, like... What was I going to say? I think these things are, like, not strict enough that you can't adopt, like, I don't know, like, have your position be at least a little bit molded by the environment, like, the social environment you're in.
Well, the USSR isn't around anymore, so I don't think any of my modern geopolitical critiques...
No, sure, but some people, like, I think if you're, like, I think going in certain, if you, especially internationally, there's certain point, like, I think that the pro-America stuff can be tactically useful, like, in the U.S., especially, but there's certain parts internationally where I think it's, like, explicitly counterproductive and bad. You shouldn't do it. Like, I don't know. I feel like these positions are, like, malleable enough that you could adopt, like, I mean, the positions are all the same, like, at least, like, adopt the way it's coming from. To suit the social environment to get more people on board. I guess I don't know. I just don't know if one approach is like universally useful.
It's not about being pro-American outside of like some rhetorical framework.
Like if I was in like a huge tanky circle, I would probably not like I don't know. I probably would like not be like saying anything about the Holodomor because I feel like it's about like the environment, you know.
Well, they're fascists. I don't really care what they have to say. I feel like Americans really need to start beating.
If the people, the American online left call, like a huge portion call tankies are all fascists, then like I feel like there's a huge portion of the international left that you shouldn't be like writing off as fascist.
I completely agree. I absolutely 100% agree. You know, and that's why I love it. You know, they're like, well, you think all the MLs around the world are fascist? Yes, bring them to me. I'll tell it to their face. Yeah. Fascism is way easier to jump into than communism. Are you kidding me? To be a communist, you have to read all this fucking theory. You have to care about other people. Being a fascist, you can just be some fucking retard. Just hate an ethnic group. Go for it, you know? It's way, way, way easier. So, with this particular issue, vis-a-vis... appealing to them or whatever. You want to appeal to people? Lefties got to understand. We need to be way the fuck more patriotic, okay? That doesn't mean you have to defend 9/11 to Afghanistan Boogaloo or whatever.
But like patriotic's like country. If you're in a different country, like patriotic's like I don't know. It's patriotic. It's like I don't know. Like in the U.S., sure, like that's probably useful. But like, what do you like? Like I don't know.
I'm not American. I don't give a fuck about you. You can do whatever you want. Look, I'm talking in America, okay? All this performative anti-Americanism, and it's so ideologically toothless too. We hate America because it's capitalist. Oh yeah, like as opposed to all the other countries on Earth. Fucking like it's such a virtue signal, and it's so detrimental to our ability to actually get shit done. Because as long as we're the American hating group, you're never going to succeed in American politics. If lefties actually gave a fuck about curtailing American imperialism, they would give more of a shit about actually seizing power within the systems they could use to curtail that imperialism.
I basically agree with you in the United States, but do you have anything you're going to say to anyone outside the United States? Like, the majority of lefties outside the United States...
Move to America.
At the very least, ML-ish.
Sorry.
ML, like...
as a joke. Well, if you're outside the U.S., I don't know. It depends on the country you're in. I'm just look. With regards to like which like bloc to be a part of or whatever. Okay, as far as I'm concerned, there's only one world power. You can have whatever feelings you want about that, but if it comes down to like simping for America or simping for China, I would choose neither. I would recognize that America is the more stable and politically beneficial hegemon, and then I would do what I can do to try to achieve power within that group. That's all I'm talking about, If you're in America, being performatively anti-American, probably going to bite you in the ass when it comes time to vote.
Sure. But there are like basically huge swaths of countries being formally, not even formally, just a lot of countries really hate America, and it's like I would say probably like beneficial. I don't know.
Really? I mean, how, like in terms of the recent UN vote on condemning Russian aggression in Ukraine indicated not necessarily who hates or doesn't hate America, but at the very least who's in which geopolitical bloc. And I think really the world stands with America here. Like you have, India, China, North Korea, Iran. There are countries that don't, but if you took a look at like the world, both by population and, well, by population, China and India weigh things heavily. So by population, it'd be a little bit more even. In terms of economic potential, though, and like number of countries, I think it's no, I think the world's mostly in with America here. Population wise, they're cheating though, right? India and China just have so many people. So many people. Yeah.
What about like if it's not like a block thing, right? Like you obviously have the blocks, but you also have like nationalism, right? Every country that's not one of those blocks has another option, which is just like nationalism, right?
Well, yeah, of course. Again, like it's obviously more complicated than I'm making it out to be right now. I can't summarize all like geopolitics or whatever. I'm just saying, in terms of like where people should be aligning, I think we should be promoting people aligning with America instead of China, because those are pretty much the only two choices worldwide right now, and we can use that relative geopolitical power to our advantage if we actually manage to gain some power within America. That would be my goal.
I think most countries benefit from aligning to like playing them both off each other, right? Like I feel like it's like almost overwhelmingly most countries benefit off that.
Well, small countries, yes. Poor countries, yes. I would agree with that. Playing off both sides.
Yeah.
Well,
most countries are small and poor.
If that's the case, that's their right. If they want to play off both sides, then I think we should offer them the better deal. Like I think we should make a strong, positive argument for the superiority of our position. That's what we did with Ukraine, after all, right? Like better to side with us than them. And I think we can work off of that. And, ideally they would make the choice to be with us. I don't think we're going back to the Cold War era days where we're just going to start like invading countries in Central America or whatever. If they don't like have trade deals with us. I don't think we're going to have another like United Fruit Company moment, like where we invade, like the CIA is just like, yeah, okay, fuck it.
Like, I guess you're trying to offer better, like, do you really think if all countries were aligned with the US, that would be better? Like explicitly, like they were directly aligned with the US, that would be... A
multipolar world is very destructive. The world is not a better place because like multiple superpowers are fighting over billions of people's lives. I don't think that's better at all. I would much rather the world be united under a single hegemon, and then for us to form like mutually beneficial trade blocks within that hegemon with minimal conflict, than having like China and America like constantly battling over the third world.
Don't you have more room for like political variance in a multipolar world though?
Yeah, but for what? Because if there was no, like, if it's political variance for stuff like what China is doing, then I don't care. If it's political variance like within different flavors of socialism, communism, or liberal democracy, then I do care. But the problem that I have is that it seems like the existence of a multipolar world discourages democracies from existing. Conflict discourages democracies from existing. The countries touched by conflict during the Cold War generally were not democracies. So it seems like the more conflict there is, the less democracy there can be, and the more multipolar the world, the more conflict. So my hope would be that a unipolar world would have less conflict. Therefore, it would there would be more room for peace and economic development, and that would mean there's more like a flourishing of democracy and so on and so forth.
I guess where I would disagree is I think it's like military conflict that does the worst. I feel like most conflict the U.S. and China are going to have would be economic. I just don't expect a lot of direct military conflict between U.S. and Asia, U.S. and China in a multi.
Yeah, but proxy conflicts and also economic conflict can be incredibly destructive, right? So what Russia's doing in Ukraine is unique because it is a military conflict over like regional power. But if we're talking about economic conflict, like look what's happening in Africa right now, right? Like the problem is we're essentially getting the problem with capitalism here, where like the competition is going to lead to like negative externalities in the long run. We have the Belt and Road Initiative in Africa, which is going to make those countries economically subservient to China, the same way the IMF and World Bank do all over the world, which, okay, to be fair, China's only like cribbing from our book there. I can't really say that's uniquely bad of them. In fact, in many ways, the Belt and Road Initiatives are better than what we've done with the IMF and World Bank. But like, as long as that continues to happen, you know, those countries will remain subservient to China, our countries will remain subservient to us. It seems like it dampens like regional hegemony, and I don't know. It also kind of feels like a lot of America's like aggression abroad is brought about by potential resource scarcity. So to give you an example, right, like the conflict over Ukraine right now is in large part because of natural gas and because of black peat, you know, the soil or the soil to grow stuff in. But like how much of our aggressive resource farming from the developing world is brought about as a component of us trying to compete with other regional hegemons, you know? Like, maybe a lot of the reason why we're so invested in keeping half of the world under our boot is because we have a fear of the other country that's trying to keep the other half of the world under their boot. Maybe if there wasn't another power to fight with, we wouldn't, there wouldn't be as much of an economic incentive. We could allow for broader development. I would need to think more about that. I think there's potential.
To be like, oh, we won. We're the only hegemon. Now let's just not keep going. And like, I don't know if I honestly, there's no reason I feel like for a hegemon to back down, like ever really.
Well, they wouldn't need to back down because there'd be nothing to fight over. They could gain the access to those resources.
More control,
now.
Right? Just like more control. Like U.S. hegemon, but it's not like a total hegemon. You can always like up until some 1984 stuff.
Control for what? Going. Keep in mind, our closest allies are in Western Europe, and they're also countries we have some of the least control over. They're allies, but they're also our equals.
Sure, but their economies are also the least developed based off like natural like resources, right? This is the most like.
Right, but Norway has its oil fund. I think it's possible for us to extend beyond that. If you want to look at historical allegories, by the way, in terms of peace in the region, which do you think was better for the people in like the Mediterranean? The Roman Empire at its height or at its collapse? Like, it feels like even if there's just one giant evil power or whatever, having everybody under that umbrella allows for a lot more development and a lot more regional security than the conflict and the economic, tumult that you get from different powers fighting it out, whether that be through economic proxies or directly militarily. I guess my goal would be that eventually it could lead to a kind of one world government situation where, because everyone's an ally anyway, like eventually something like the United Nations ends up actually regulating decision making between all these countries. America's strong, but it's not as economically powerful as the rest of the world combined, you know. 1 second. What's up?
You streaming late tonight?
A little late. Probably 11, maybe later.
No, I was.
Okay, yeah. Sorry.
I don't care.
Continue? Sorry. I'm back.
Yeah. Okay, so I feel like a one world government just gives you more like, you know, not to be a bit cliche, but I feel like it gives you more room to just like do the whole one like I don't know, it's called one world government. I feel like that's kind of a little bit.
Wait,
like,
you don't want a one world government?
That's enforced through like one hegemon government. I guess it depends like how you define government in one world and stuff. But I feel like one hegemon. One world government that's just one hegemon enforced like enforced one world is like probably not like ideal, right?
Well, but it wouldn't just
like
be one hegemon, right? It would be like a one world government. Like it's not like America controls the United Nations. We can't get the UN to do shit, you know? Like all you'd have to do is set up some kind of like a global governmental organization. And like again, the United States is powerful, but we're not powerful like 90% of America's strength is the fact that we have allies. If America was alone in the world, we didn't have any economic, like, trading partners, we didn't have a bloc to call upon, we would be very powerful, of course. But, like, I'm pretty sure that we would be weaker than Europe, economically. Guys, I could be wrong on this. Isn't the EU, doesn't it have a higher GDP than the United States? Like all the EU versus the United States? Yes. Yeah. I thought so. Like we're really strong. Don't get me wrong, but like if there was a world power, we wouldn't have sole control over it. I think it would turn into a global democracy.
Sure, but I guess at that point it's like I guess it's sort of semantic as one world government then, right? Because I feel like ideally the government it would have to be some kind of regional democracy, right? You couldn't have like maybe you can do top down, but I feel like most people would agree a more confederated system probably better, right?
No, I don't want. No, I'm an anarchist. I don't want borders. My goal here is the abolition of all states. The more multipolar the world is, the more divided we are.
That's like ultra confederated then, right? Like
No, it's not confederated at all. There's just one planet with people on it. You know, the more divisions we enforce, I don't know.
like
I just don't like
confederate can also be
multipolarity.
like a group of people, right? It's just a group of like it wouldn't be just like it wouldn't isn't anarchism mostly conceived as a bunch of like council like recursive councils basically.
Well, I'm a anarcho-syndicalist, so you know you'd have your syndicate councils and all that, but you can't
I
have
feel like
borders.
I don't know, you don't need borders for it to be like I feel like anarcho-syndicalism is much more like it's much more accurately conceived of as a whole bunch of different groups in one group, right? Like it's a lot closer to basically like
Not having borders is a pretty explicit requirement for anarchism. Yeah, Chilleft in chat is correct. If you don't like anarchism and you prefer communism, keep in mind that there's no way we're ever going to have a communist revolution if there are other non-communist countries that can fuck with us and engage in counter-revolutionary activity. The communist revolution needs to be global. It requires the simultaneous uprising of the proletariat. If you have a multipolar world, you're never going to be able to achieve this, because if either pole decides to engage in a communist uprising, they would then immediately be fucking crushed by the comparatively autocratic capitalist bloc.
it only assumes that the leftist one is like weaker than the other one, right?
Well, yeah, real
Like
communism would entail.
if the USSR with capital, I don't know, it's not the USSR, it's just like the Russian Empire, but like capitalist, like, and the USA had the revolution. Like I don't think like it would have reversed situation. Like the US would still have been like the more dominant power.
It would be real communism would be stateless. There would be no USA, and thus they could have
the population of the USA.
There is no. I do believe that anarchist and communist societies can defend themselves. I do not believe communism can survive the entire other half of the world, engaging in military action against them. The more it seems to me that the more idyllic and democratic a civic system is, the more fragile it is. Democracies are more fragile than autocracies, and autocracies are more fragile than like strong men, like brutalist states. Like full on. Like a totalitarian dictatorship is more fragile than just like a warlord over a desert. The more complicated things are, the more fragile they are, and they have to be protected.
It's one of those things where I look at the data. Like I feel like you can create intuitive answers both ways, right? Like you can make pretty strong. You can make intuitive arguments for why democracy is more stable or less stable. So I'd have to look at that.
Well, how could a communist society maintain a military against like another polar world without a state?
I guess I don't know. I'm not let me think a bit. Like I'm not like a super particular on like what flavor leftism. Like I'm not like I don't know. I feel like a lot of people are like really too ideological.
At the very least, I hope we can agree that any real communist revolution would be an incredibly delicate time, in that like region's development, and it would be beneficial if there wasn't like a vulture circling the whole time.
I guess I feel like. Maybe, but I feel like for example, like the Cold War stuff, like the USSR and the US, I feel like the ideologies of what they were mattered way less than their like economic situations at the beginning and at the end. Like I don't know if it like,
but they weren't that different, right?
I don't really feel it was like capitalism beats like state capitalism, whatever. It was just like the USSR's industrial base beat the USSR's industrial base. And
sure, yeah, but that's not a communist revolution, right?
I feel like leftist-ish, probably. I think it's still compatible with a leftist revolution.
Well, the Soviet Union they never had a communist or socialist revolution. Like, Lenin had his revolution immediately after crushed all the worker councils and then implemented an autocratic state where he and, like, hand-picked party members would decide basically every level of the government. Like they never had they just it was literally just like a coup. Like there was just like one autocrat to the next.
I guess I think a leftist revolution could still have an army probably and still be like left. I don't know. I feel like
I
you can
agree,
have
but
a left
I hope we
army.
could agree it would be a lot easier to do communism if like the other half of the world wasn't trying to crush us. Wasn't that the argument that the Soviet defenders would say, like, hey, America, stop like crushing our revolution? It would be easier to do this if you weren't fighting with us. Anyway, look,
That's also,
unipolarity.
sure.
Yeah, unipolarity
I
just
agree.
seems like it would make it easier to manage that.
Uh, Perhaps. I guess I have to think about it more. I don't know how we're doing on time, but I guess the last things I had on my like little notes and stuff on
Ah,
what to
yes.
do is
Now
like you
from
mentioned.
point 2 of 2 now. Yes, hit me up.
As you mentioned the bombings of Yugoslavia and Libya, I don't know what your stance on those are, but I think, but I recall at least from what I overheard, is that you were like relatively like I don't know, I don't know if pro them, but like didn't consider them that big a deal or that bad.
Yeah, from
And I
what
feel like
little I've looked into them, they just don't seem to be as big of a deal as a lot of people make them out to be. It seems like the shit that was happening in Libya was like poorly executed, but not.
or what about funding and arming rebels, which then did a like I feel like pumping a bunch of arms to an unstable region and there's not a civil war. I feel like this is like pretty like we
Well,
funded a
yes,
bunch of like
Serbia,
the U.S.
Yugoslavia.
and France.
I don't
Uh,
I don't inherently have anything against funding rebels if you do a good job. It's not like the
I
government.
feel like Libya was a bad job though, right?
Oh,
Like Libya just really.
I agree, yeah. But like the vast majority of the harm that was done in Libya was not because of NATO involvement, like not at all. Like the no-fly zone, like I looked more into it, like the no-fly zone they put over, I think was considered like a moderate success in preventing the
Whoa,
bombing runs they were
I
doing against civilians.
I don't know was how substantial. Like I know at least one report like from the U.S. military said the initial air attacks that the no-fly zone was justified on did not have they didn't find like the military intelligence didn't find strong evidence. I don't know if it changed later. Like, I'm not like an expert in this, but I read a
Pretty
report
sure
from
it
the
was well
U.S.
documented
military
that they were
that
doing
the
air
that the
raids on like civilians.
I guess I'd have to maybe look more into it, but like what I found, at least at least two reports from U.S. military reports mentioning that they didn't find the initial firing from the air that was not like found through military intelligence after that.
Well, I can
Didn't.
look at it. It's
And I feel
yeah.
like it's like I don't know. Also, I feel like we put a bunch of weapons and money in like rebels, like basically arming a bunch of rebels, like and then like, there's also, like I feel like that pretty directly led to like instability, like contributed to the Second Civil War,
Um,
right?
I'm pretty sure the conditions were laid for the wait. What is the timeline here? Hold on. I'm pretty sure the conditions for the Second Civil War were pretty much laid in stone. I don't think there's any evidence that our involvement there is what caused that later on.
I think at the very least it made it. I mean, you have to agree it made it worse, right? Like I don't know. I feel like putting more weapons into a situation kind of made it better, right?
Um, Not necessarily. Like us giving weapons to Ukraine has made it better. Um, so
Sure, but I think Ukraine's, I guess, more stable. It's more stable. Like, isn't the argument for Ukraine is it's a stable state as
well,
opposed
yeah,
to
we
like
were giving it to
means?
rebels. Man, I don't know. My position on this has moved with time. It seems like how do I put this? It seems like every once in a while, like a nation or an organization like NATO will do something that's totally fucking evil and completely indefensible. So for me, the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq are like really clear examples of that. Like 100% no reservations. Like, were those evil on the part of the United States? Unequivocal, like no denying it. Absolutely, completely, 100%. And then the left will talk about those invasions the same way they'll talk about like NATO's bombing of Serbia. And I hear that and I go
Oh
like,
no,
oh,
that's
that
the
was as
second. That's the second. That's the
well.
second one
No,
I
no,
have.
no. I know. I'm just or the Libya thing, and I hear that and I go, oh, those are like the same bad. And then I look into the shit with NATO, and it's like, wait, this is actually incredibly complicated. And then I look into it more, and I'm like, wait, was this good? And I'm like, okay, well, it clearly wasn't done well. It had bad outcomes, but okay, but was this like reasonable? And like, okay, so what was the death count? It's like, oh wait, it was like 1,000 people. Like that's bad, of course. Like the invasion of Iraq led to hundreds of thousands of people dying, and it all gets bled together, and it's so reductive. You know what I mean? With the Libya stuff, like did NATO do a good job? I don't think so. But Was what they did evil? Was what they did like...
They bombed like water irrigation, right?
I'm sorry?
They bombed like water irrigation, like the water irrigation system in Libya was bombed by NATO, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, modern like military
That's gotta,
doctrine involves the destruction of like pretty much all infrastructure all the
that's
time.
got to be evil. I don't know, destroying water systems is up there. I feel like it's like I don't know, top 5 evil. Like I don't know.
I agree. I agree. That's bad. I'm talking about the decision to get involved to begin with, because it's not as though when they laid out the plans, like in the NATO headquarters,
Sure,
to get
like
involved, they were like, "We need to bomb this
thing, right? That's
Huh?
like they said. I think that's the whole mission creep issue. Like they go in for a no-fly zone over, at least from what I read, reports that weren't like super substantiated by military intelligence later, and then they went from mission they went from like no-fly zone to like expanding bombing to expand to bombings and stuff, and then like it feels like the whole thing escalated, and every time it escalated, it was like worse. Like I don't know, I feel like
Okay.
the decision to go in the first place was part of like what enabled all the escalations to allow it to be like.
So that
Yeah.
I disagree with. I don't think there's any evidence whatsoever that NATO's involvement was what led to things escalating. It's the same with the bombing of Serbia.
NATO's involvement escalated.
Well, no, you could say
NATO
that it de-escalated if you want to make that argument, because the no-fly zone prevented the air raids against civilians for a time. Did it end up working out in the long term?
No, I mean like they started with no-fly zone, and then they started and then eventually it became bombings, like right, like they're bombing lots of like infrastructure. Like those are like pretty distinct things,
Well,
right? Like
well, yeah. The
the
Libyan government
issue-
was fucking evil. You know, I think that was kind of part. The point was to like stop the Libyan government. It makes sense that they would then do bombing runs.
I guess but I feel like bombing water infrastructure has got to be like not.
Again, I'm
Not
not
justifiable.
defending that specifically. I'm just saying the involvement generally. I don't want to like get into the
Sure.
parsing the details of the moral worth of every single bomb that was felled. You know, I'm just talking about the involvement generally. And the concept, hey, there's this dictator called, you know, Gaddafi, who's like killing a bunch of civvies and is like a total dick, and we can maybe prevent people from dying by enforcing a no-fly zone with our like gigantic, enormous military power. Like, this is in concept. This is something that I can understand an argument for. I can hear that out and think like, okay, you know, maybe that's reasonable. Same with Serbia, right? Like tens of thousands of people were dying in Serbia, and evidence seems to suggest that NATO bombing curtailed it to an extent. You know, it probably saved more lives than it ended. When I look at stuff like that and I see lefties calling it like evil, maybe poorly done, sure, worthy of criticism, sure, but we don't get that nuance when we talk about this stuff.
The lefty argument, and I guess this is my argument here, like I agree with them here, is that like these interventions, they disagree with your characterization. They said these were bad. They did not like improve harm, and obviously like they're not like and the idea is like the U.S. can't successfully pull off interventions. When they do interventions, they cause a lot of harm for not a lot of benefit.
But so, I think we didn't we help. I'm pretty sure we helped in Serbia with NATO.
I have like I don't think we did, like, or not we, U.S.
But I'm pretty sure we did though. Doesn't the evidence indicate that like yeah, like I understand that like lefty Twitter is going to fucking hate me for this or whatever, but I'm pretty sure the evidence indicates that NATO involvement in Serbia was
well, like I don't think like the basic my opinion, like I think it's pretty clear. Like I guess if you look, to me it seems like very much didn't like from the evidence, like the damage done, like there's a lot of like damage done that like hurt the country, making it like unable to recover. And U.S. intelligence reports said they predicted they predicted the bombings would lead to escalations, and the bombings happened, and then escalations happened. Like
what in Libya?
No, sorry, in Kosovo as a result of the NATO bombing of Yugoslavia. Like, U.S. military intelligence indicated that if these bombings will likely lead to escalations.
But did it? I'm pretty sure things panned out.
There was bombing, then it escalated.
Okay, wait, so what do you mean by escalated, exactly?
The violence in Kosovo between the Yugoslav forces and the Albanian forces, as Kosovo Albanians, escalated as because of the bombing, or after the bombing, which U.S. military intelligence said was because of the bombing. Well, we predicted it, and then
okay, hold on. Start again, please.
Okay, so there was fighting in Kosovo. Like it was like the war, Kosovo War, right?
Yes.
There's this escalating conflict. U.S. military intelligence indicates that that intervening, the quote unquote humanitarian intervention, which wasn't even a humanitarian intervention then, it was a strategic intervention. Like the explicit reason that the NATO justified intervention there was for strategic interests. Like only later did they I'm not saying so claiming humanitarian intervention. So then then the bombing started, and after the bombings, the violence there escalated, it became worse. Like there was more violent, like it became worse.
How
Which
long
is
after the NATO bombings did Serbia withdraw from Kosovo?
I think it was 80 days, right?
Isn't that pretty good? Like they were doing a genocide, and then we did a bombing run. You know, about 1,500 people died, most of which were Yugoslav security forces, and then like
Well,
just a few months
public
after,
utilities were destroyed, like civilians were killed, and also
okay, they were
these like
doing a
custom issues,
genocide.
and it got worse. The bombing made it worse.
They,
Like the
then
violence
why'd they
became worse
leave after?
What?
But
They leave at the end, but the violence escalated during the bombing.
the vast majority of the deaths and displacements during the genocide were before the NATO bombing. The overwhelming majority. Am I wrong on that?
Check my notes.
Yeah, hold on.
Like, not really notes, just like
Kosovo War, hold on. Armed conflict, Kosovo, death toll.
crazy things. This many like people like I don't actually know how many years there are. But, like I don't know, just say stuff, and I have to like make sure I don't know what they're wrong.
Like millions of people displaced, tens of thousands of people killed. The airstrikes lasted from the 24th of March to the 10th of June in 1999. The Kosovo War lasted about a year and a half. Let me see. After attempts at a diplomatic solution failed, NATO intervened, justifying a campaign as a humanitarian war. This precipitated a mass expulsion of Kosovar Albanians as the Yugoslav forces continued to fight during the aerial bombing. By 2000, investigations had recovered the remains of almost 3,000 victims of all ethnicities. In 2001, the UN-administered Supreme Court, based in Kosovo, found there had been a systemic campaign of terror, including murders, rapes, arsons, and severe maltreatments, but that Yugoslav troops had tried to remove rather than eradicate the Albanian population.
It did escalate right after the bombing started. Like I think
it just says they continued to fight through it, not that it escalated.
Can you reread the top? Can you read the which early semi-where second? Because I'm
just looking at the Wikipedia article for the Kosovo War. There's like a million. It's super complicated shit. I'd have to like look into it for a million years to. Also, like I don't like how do you know that the NATO bombing wasn't part of what led to the end of the war? Like maybe after all, us invading Germany after World War II had begun led to an escalation in conflict, but it's necessary to bring about the end of the war.
After attempts at diplomatic solution failed, NATO intervened, justifying the campaign as a humanitarian war. Although this was later. First, it was strategic interest was their initial.
Hey, don't paraphrase. You're reading Wikipedia. Go ahead. Humanitarian war.
This precipitated a mass expulsion of Albanians. So the bombing precipitated the mass expulsion. So it did escalate things. The bombing created an escalation in the violence.
Like how do you know? Wait, how do you know it created it? It just said that it came before. And additionally, again,
it made it happen.
Didn't the invasion of Germany lead to a mass expulsion and death of people as well? Like I don't think this changes. Like you realize fighting back in a war leads to more death than just like rolling up. There
was already fighting. This was like it was a war. The U.S. intervention made it worse. Which
how do you okay, let me try to get more specific here, okay? So let's say it's World War II and the Battle of the Bulge has happened. We're pushing into Germany. We're gonna kill people in Germany, okay? Now let's say US officials say we can push into Germany, it's gonna lead to a huge increase in death, but we can do it. And then we do it. Was it wrong for us to do that if it brought about the end of the war? Like, I think maybe NATO involvement there led to a surge in conflict, like, through that, but it also brought about the end of the genocide, in which case it would be good.
Like, but it made it worse. You like, I don't know, like this is the argument. Like,
Okay, like maybe it led to an increase in conflict at the time, but it also might have brought about an end to the genocide.
but it might. We like you don't know. Like you can't like.
Well, you can't make assumptions and then shoot down my assumptions, especially when mine sounds pretty reasonable. Hey, the most powerful military alliance on the planet bombed the shit out of your country. That probably is going to put
I
the
think
pressure
bias,
on them.
it should be against bombings. Like I think that's like that's where like the
Wait, I'm
default
not
state not
against.
to bomb
Wait,
things.
I'm not against
I mean,
bombings. They were committing a genocide.
I think the default's like, but I like it was made. It was the situation was made worse by the bombing. Like the bombing created worse in the
But it
situation.
could have ended the war as well. So maybe it led to an uptick in conflict then, but maybe only an uptick in conflict would have been enough to bring about an end to the war. Of the genocide, I should say.
That's it. This is gonna be like people get mad, but I don't think it's like it's not a genocide, right? It's an ethnic cleansing. Like
Are you
under
being real
UN
with me
law.
right now?
I told you to get me mad. Like I'm just saying, like technically, I agree. I'm not gonna like say it's meaningful. It's not meaningful. I don't think it's meaningful this argument. I'm just want to like under UN law. Like I think I'm correct. I'm not like.
This is what I mean. This is what I mean. On the selective language, you know, what we care to speak on.
I would do that to the US. I don't know. I feel like I'm like I would
listen.
Like, I mean,
if the bombings led to an uptick in conflict at the time, but also brought about a faster end to the conflict, I think that's good.
The conflict was more. It may increase the amount of civilian targeted though. That's the problem. It escalated the war.
Hundreds of thousands of civilians had already been pushed out of their homes. Tens of thousands were already dead. The bombing killed less than 500 civilians. Tragic, yes, but
no, but the expulsion of civilians was made worse by the bombing, which was...
How do you know they wouldn't have been expelled anyway?
Because I mean, in this case, I'm going to defer to U.S. military analysts.
No. You keep making one argument and then assuming it's made another. Okay, listen. Let me put my feet down, okay? I am okay with the bombing of Yugoslavia leading to more immediate harm because it brings about less harm in the long term. That's the case for basically all military engagement.
Sure,
you engage, which leads to an immediate increase in death and suffering. But the hope is that if you win, which of course we will, it's Yugoslavia, you then end the conflict and therefore prevent more harm in the long term.
But
it's the same thing with Ukraine.
The conflict can change its character because of the intervention, though.
They had already been doing a genocide. I think the character of the conflict was well decided by the time NATO intervened.
So, but the U.S. military intelligence said it would become the civilian like the escalation against civilians would be worsened. Like they said, ethnic violence.
I've already answered this. I've already answered this.
So that indicates to me that without the intervention, it would be the degree would be less like severe.
But it could have kept going on for longer. Like, this is the same thing with Ukraine. You realize right now the death count in Ukraine would be lower if they had just let Russia invade and surrendered? They're fighting and suffering now to prevent decades of Russian occupation in the long term. This is how all military... all military engagements work.
But I think the math would be different, or at least like the calculation would be maybe the end result isn't. If, for example, U.S. military analysts thought and predicted that arming Ukraine with U.S. equipment would lead to Russians targeting ethnic Ukrainian civilians more severely.
It has. Us arming Ukraine directly led to the death of more Ukrainian soldiers. If it weren't for us arming them... And civilians. The only reason Russia is targeting cities right now is because they're frustrated that they can't get any military victories. Us arming Ukraine led directly to Russia killing more Ukrainian civilians. And that's fine, because the alternative was Russian occupation, which would have killed way more in the long run. This is literally how the concept of military defense works.
Well, I guess I think the degree would have been different. I think escalation was much more severe in this. The intervention caused much more severe escalation.
This is speculation on your part. The math looks really good from my side of things. NATO bombed, and then like 2 months afterwards, they pulled out and surrendered and signed like the peace accords. And they were already doing the genocide for like a year before NATO intervened. Like already like nearly 1 million people had been displaced by that point. I do not think that NATO involvement made things worse. I think it made things better. I'm a pro-NATOist here. I think it's good, actually, to bomb countries when they're doing genocides.
I guess I just think it made it work. Like, I think it's pretty. I guess I don't know. Like, it's like that.
Well, what would it take to make you think that it had led to an improvement?
If like the, like if it had like if the situation hadn't like if the prediction and the situation hadn't been an escalation in response to intervention.
But that's fine. That's what happens when you intervene. The point is that it ends the conflict. Are you saying you would have preferred the conflict to have gone on for another year if it meant that NATO not involving?
I think that would have been less. Like there would have been less total.
That is insane. An extra year of that genocide would have led to less harm than the slight uptick that took place after NATO bombed, which lasted only a couple months before they surrendered?
I think the bombing made this yeah. I think that only made the situation worse.
How? By what? How? What mathematical calculation could possibly lead you to believe that a genocide which displaced millions of people and killed tens of thousands would have had less of a negative outcome if it had gone on for an extra year than if it had simply had a surge in its violence as a product of it being ended abruptly by NATO intervention? The genocide would have just kept going. We have no evidence to believe they would have stopped. It seems like ethnic hatred and occupation were their goal.
It was what the goal was to stop the secessionist movement. What?
Are you?
That was that was the goal, right?
That was what they said their goal was.
Well, like, I'm not saying like isn't it clearly like the goal though? Like the it was a response. Like it was just like that was like.
It was ethnic hatred. There were mass graves. There were rapes and just civilian.
It was escalatory violence. Like,
no, it was ethnic hatred.
I thought the KLA started like it was a series of escalatory conflicts.
Wait, I'm sorry. Wait, which country did you say you were from again?
What?
What country?
Montenegro.
Okay, now I see.
Was.
You have access to a unique kind of racism that I don't have. You see, I am an American, okay? But I don't have access to the unique Balkan racism. The special fucking skull bump that people in this region of the world have somehow have the worst possible ethnic positions on their neighbors, despite the fact that I'm pretty sure you're all the fucking same. Holy shit.
Bosniaks, Croatians, and Serbs are all ethnically the same. Albanians are just like a little bit different. But
the fact that you can the fact that you responded to what I just said with that.
You can know that. What do you mean?
The fact that you responded with that. The fact that your immediate response was "Don't lump me in with those Albanians" is so fucking telling.
No, I'm trying to support your argument here. No, you said they're all the same, and I wanted to clarify they're all the same.
Except for those dirty Albanians who got what they deserved.
It's just a different group. What do you want to say?
In the secession, in the glorious secessionist uprising of the Yugoslavs.
It was bad. It was bad. I'm saying the goal. It clearly was the goal. Was like. The initial goal was clearly stop the secessionist movement. It became worse. Like that's not like doesn't change the initial goal, right?
I don't care what the initial goal was. I care what they did and why they did it. I don't know what the initial fucking Hitler wanted to go to art school. You know, Jesus, it's pretty clear how that turned out. They displaced millions. What liberatory movement was that?
What? It was not liberatory. It's anti. I didn't say it was liberatory. I never said it was liberatory. I feel like you're
secessionist, like liberation.
Yeah, the KLA was secessionists.
Which involves marching into Kosovo.
The Kosovo War, KLA, the Kosovo Liberation Army, wanted to secede. So they started a campaign like there was escalatory violence, back and forth between different groups that escalated. Like it didn't initially start like full military, right? This is like not like I'm not looking at actions here. I feel like this is like just like an accurate description, like a pretty fair historical description of like terrorist attacks, ramping up into retaliations, into terrorist attacks, into war, where one group's goal is to secede, one group to stop a secessionary movement. That's what
they invaded. They invaded Kosovo. I mean, it wasn't just like internal disputes.
There's part of there. Kosovo was part of Serbia. It's like it's the field, the Kosovo field. I'm not like that's not like an nationalist thing. Like at the time, and historically, Kosovo is the name of the field, like is of like where like the Serbs like fought the Ottomans, like all the monasteries are there, you know, like all the historical ones. Like it's a secession movement.
Okay, but
Like I'm not
they
like
invaded another country.
no, it didn't. Kosovo was part of Serbia. Like it was like a Texas. Like it was part of the country.
But
The
they
KLA,
seceded.
yeah, like it's a secession. Like the Kosovo unilaterally like or it wasn't even declared independence then. A military faction in Kosovo wanted independence, so they attempted to basically secede, and then the military of the country that was part of did what every single country in that situation would do, and sent troops to as because of the escalatory violence. Like it didn't start with initially with troop action. It started with basically terrorist attacks, and then police action back, and then like militias, and then attempt to secede, and then military intervention by the main country. Like that's like I don't think it's good, but it's like very like normal. Like it's very not normal. Like it's very predictable. Like if any country has a group tries to secede from the country, you would expect the country to send the army into that country, like that region of the country, the secessionary group.
To
Like,
do what they did?
No, but like I'm just saying it was like I'm just saying that the goal was to prevent a secessionary movement. Like that's true, right? Like I feel like it's not like a like genocide denial or anything. That's just like is that like I think it's like
fuck. I don't. No, you got me on this one. I don't know. I don't know enough about the fucking Kosovo War to dispute this. I wonder if I knew more if I could dispute you on this. I just don't know enough. I don't know the there's your crazy little countries down there doing a lot of wacky shit. You know that? There's a lot of history down there.
I mean, it's very silly. Like like especially like the Bosnian stuff. It's like they're all the same people. Like literally genetically, like basically the same. Except religion. Religion's different.
You're all the
That's my
same.
original point. I wasn't trying to like I don't know be like I'm not an Albanian. I'm actually half part
I don't know.
Albanian,
It's just we're talking about the genocide of
okay,
Albanians, where I'm defending the intervention that probably ended the genocide. And you're like, okay, so just so you know, genetically, I'm not at all like those Albanians.
No, I'm not. Like, I'm actually kind of am. Like, I'm just saying, like, I'm from the border. Like, Montenegro has a border with, like, I'm basically from the border of, like, Albania and Montenegro. Like, I mean, I'm a part Albanian. Like, it's not like, I don't know. Not like a massive Balkanoid racist. Like, they're all the exact same. Like, they're the same people. Like, actually, I think, there's like, maybe for Yugoslavia. Like, you mentioned earlier that you thought, like, the break of Yugoslavia was, like, happened on its own. That's one of the things, like, I wanted to, at every time is, like, I think the West, like especially Germany and the US, had pretty direct involvement in the breakup of Yugoslavia.
I mean, it was going to break up anyway. The Soviet Union occupation of the area was like
it was not part of the Soviet bloc, right? Yugoslavia was its own independent bloc. It was obviously backed in part, but it was like I'm not saying it wasn't connected. I'm saying they were like they were not like they were at least a little bit distinct.
Yugoslavia's situation was definitely a direct product of the geopolitical tension caused by the clash. You know, the Iron Curtain. I don't think it could have survived a post-Cold War world, like, at all.
Well, the U.S. actually initially backed a united Yugoslavia, as long as they were not communist. They backed the united Yugoslavia as long as they could use IMF loans to liberalize the economy, like to decommunize the economy.
No, I understand that. I'm just saying that it seems like, I mean, it's not like Yugoslavia was a democracy or whatever. I feel like the Soviet Union did the same shit in Eastern and Central Europe as like what we did in the Middle East or Africa, where we like kept a foot on these parts of the world for so long, and then the moment we like let our foot off, there are a bunch of these like long-standing ethnic tensions that have been kept supplanted by.
Well, it wasn't the Soviet Union there. It was Tito.
Well, in that case, it would be like the pressure created by the position between NATO and the Soviet Union, like the Soviet bloc. I think it would be like it was the Soviet, being hardened to a
Soviet
diamond.
Support of socialism in Yugoslavia, socialism to central socialism to over like be on top of nationalism, but then the problem is the part of the IMF liberalization like requirements wanted to depower the federal central government because it was like the most socialist element, obviously, right? Because it's in that kind of economy, and by depowering that, and they in order to do that, they weakened that. They wanted to push reforms that weakened that and strengthen nationalists, because in the the republics that made it up.
Okay, wait. But what does that have to do with the ethnic tensions within Yugoslavia that
I was supporting the nationalists. The nationalists took power and then did a bunch of nationalism. That's
okay,
like I think, and then like ultra nationalism
but
because they
there were supplanted ethnic tensions within Yugoslavia for a long time prior to that, I'm pretty sure.
yeah, but they were not dominant because of the central socialist element, and then the nationalist groups were not in that much. Were not in. Did not have a strong. Did not have a lot of power. Like the like sort of like there was like the Serb nationalists like historically like under like while Tito was still alive tried to push more Serbian power, but the and like basically kind of a coup, but that was like shut down and like was like basically diffused. And for example, the whole reason Kosovo exists as like a region because it was an autonomous region set up in like Serbia to like same with Vojvodina to like diffuse the power of like nationalism and power in the region to promote like brotherhood and unity as the doctrine. But it was the weakening
I
of
would have to
these.
learn more. I'm sorry. This is the yeah. The Balkan region is just so much of its own horse. I'm looking
Like
at this
by
now, and apparently, okay, so like apparently Yugoslavia was literally just like post World War One, a bunch of other countries getting crunched together into one. That's gonna
not
cause some.
really. Those countries were like parts of other empires for a lot of it.
That's
Like
going to
Slovenia
cause
is
some
basically like
you're going
half
to get
Spartan.
ethnic tensions that way. You're going to cause ethnic tensions that way. That's an ethnic tension bundle right there. Yeah, hold on. Following their defeat of the Balkan Wars, the Ottomans ceded Kosovo to Serbia and Montenegro. Both countries joined Yugoslavia after World War One. Following a period of Yugoslav Unitarianism in the kingdom, the post-World
Sure,
War II Yugoslav constitution established the autonomous province of Kosovo and
sure, but it's a
Metohija.
little complicated. Like Kosovo had a was part.
Wait,
It's
they
part
were
of its history.
autonomous? Wait, Kosovo
Yeah,
had
that's what I just said. That's
provincial
what I just said.
autonomy?
That's what I just said. So here's explain. So Tito was the charge. He gave Vojvodina basically a region like in Serbia and Kosovo autonomy as in order to weaken uh, Serbia a bit because to make the Yugoslavian alliance more balanced and for a more like,
No wonder
united
you all
socialist.
fell apart after fucking.
But that was actually, and the reason Kosovo was part of this is like the reason it's like historical Serbian territory, but there's not Ottomans. But then there were Albanians living there. Partially, they were moved there as part of a deal with Stalin and Hoxha, which is the Albanian socialist guy, because that was a different bloc. But there weren't that many Albanians there at the start. But because Albanians are poor, it's a poor country. It's not racist, Balkan racist. It's just like it's a poor country. Like you can look up Hoxha. He was like called like Stone Age Stalinism, is what some people describe his doctrine because he was like extremely Stalinist, but also very poor country. It's like a particularly bad mix. And things like, for example, like the Yugoslav government wanted to have a higher population, obviously, because it's a developing country. Like in order to like do, because it was recovering from the war, World War II. So it gave things like grants to like families for kids, as central like states do, which led to the poorest region, like Kosovo, having like as you know, it's not like racist. Like everyone agrees, like poor countries have more kids, like poor regions have more kids, right?
Uh-huh.
I'm like trying to be careful. I feel like everything I would say in another context would be totally unobjectionable, but I'm trying to like hedge my bets because I feel like everyone's gonna be like, like harsh on me. But
I
so
admire your self-awareness. Yes, I agree that generally poor areas have more children.
and the combination of fund, like basically the combination that's happened is of like socialist funding of the region and being poor meant that like the minority in the region, the Albanians, had a much steeper population. This is not fashion stuff. I'm just saying it's like objectively facts. You can look it up. I'm being very careful. I'm being like little stuff where I feel like people are mad at me, but like I feel like this is. I don't know. It means that the population grew, and part of the tensions is the fact that a small minority population from a foreign group, like a external minority population, became the majority population, like a more majority population in the region. And that's part of the reason like the conflict happened.
Yeah, it's just it seems like historically there have been tensions between the Serbs and the Albanians for a really long time. Like even throughout Yugoslavia, and given that
I feel like it was more tension. Like, the historical tensions with the Serbs and the Ottomans because like the
that's going back
Albanians
100 years.
This is Europe. You're Americanoid. Like I
Yeah,
guess
look,
yeah, like
wait, wait. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to, because I'm trying to think now of the legitimacy of like Kosovoian independence or whatever. And like I'm reading this about like how like Yugoslav fell apart, like Tito died in 1980 or whatever. The 1981 protests in Kosovo with mass riots and nationalist demands across the province. Because they wanted a separate country, because they had been literally called the Socialist Autonomous Province of Kosovo through a good portion of Yugoslavia's
yeah,
existence.
they were
And
called
then
that though because as a countermeasure to Serb nationalism.
okay,
Like it was
but it doesn't matter for those people because it seems like they have a history of being oppressed by Serbians, like all the way going back like hundreds of years. It seems like their like
well,
demand
most of them
for
didn't live.
independence was
Well,
valid.
part of the complication is the population curve. Like that area was historically and majority population wise historically, and also up to pretty relatively recently Serb. But because of this is like
Kosovo?
the population. Yes. Kosovo is the name of the field where like the major fight between like the
No, no,
Serbs and like
Kosovo
the
is the
oh
name of
no
a country.
no it's the country's named after a field. It's like I don't know.
Okay, but
It's
I'm referring
American,
to
right?
the
Like
country.
sure, but the region, for example, like it's a historical Serb region with a minority
Okay, I don't.
like Albanian population that
It is.
became the
Okay, throughout the reign of Yugoslavia, when it was designated the Socialist Autonomous Province of Kosovo, it was
yeah.
majority Albanian, and even at that time there were constant ethnic tensions between the Albanians and the Serbians, correct?
I don't think it was majority Albanian for the until like I think it didn't start over. I think it like became.
Then at the very
I look
least,
at the population curve, but I think the Kosovo Albanians were actually a minority in the region for a certain period of time, and then became like I think there's like basically there's like two curves, and like the curve their curve that population curves high like more steeper than that Serb curve.
okay, at the very least, Serbs in the area of Kosovo were ethnically oppressive towards Albanians because the nanosecond fucking Tito died, students in Kosovo,
Well, that's
Albanians, started protests.
complicated. Basically, the reason tensions became higher is because, and this sounds bad, like, but basically,
Uh-huh.
population, like, the population, there was more, like, basically, at the beginning, it was stable because they were a minority group. So, but then they became, as the population grew, there was competition over things like land and stuff, like, in the region, which created, like, escalated tensions. Like, it's not like that, like, the tension was much less like it was much less historical. The tension was a lot of it was caused by economic circumstances that arose because of population like change. It sounds bad, like that's not what happened. I don't know
All
how
right.
you'd say that.
It seems like, I mean, I'm like speed reading this right now. It seems like it's pretty clear that Albanians have a long-standing ethnic claim to Kosovo, that they were given autonomy, at least partially, during the reign of Yugoslavia. And additionally, that they've long complained about ethnic oppression from Serbs. And the nanosecond Tito died, they were protesting for national autonomy, like back in 1981, which was like 20 years before NATO's intervention during the Kosovo War. So it seems like their claims for independence are pretty valid here. It's not like Texas rebelling, where it's been a part of the country for 200 years and it's like exactly the same as the rest of the country. It's like this is a separate
So
ethnic group.
part of has been like served for like I don't know, also very long. Like it's like and so it's a very complicated.
I'm sorry.
I don't know
Are you explicitly against Kosovoian independence?
I don't have a strong opinion on it. That's
What?
big.
Okay.
I don't have a strong opinion either. Like I don't know. I feel like I think I think it's more complicated. I think it's both. I think both sides. I don't know. That's a bit centrist, like liberal. I don't know. I think both sides often simplify it in a bad way. I don't know. It's like real. I don't. I feel like I don't know. This conversation been stuck a lot of times where I have to bite bullets that like sound bad, but I feel like it wouldn't be that bad if people were like already like they were in the conflict. I think it's a complicated. I guess it's a complicated issue, right?
I mean,
Like,
I agree with that, but it seems like independence was the answer here. Listen to this.
there was a. I mean,
After
independence, like
after Tito's death in 1980, the demands for recognition of Kosovo as an independent country were renewed. In March of 81, Albanian students started the 81 protests in Kosovo, where social protests turned into violent mass riots with nationalist demands across the province, which the Yugoslav authorities contained with force. immigration of non-Albanians increased, and ethnic tensions between Albanians and non-Albanians greatly increased, with violent inter-attacks, especially aimed at the Yugoslavian officials and representatives of authority. In 88 and 89, Serbian authorities engaged in a series of moves known as the anti-bureaucratic revolution, which resulted in the sacking of province leadership in 88 and a significant reduction of autonomy of Kosovo in March of 1989. I don't know, man. It seems like they should have been two separate countries. This seems like it's
complicated. The land for it's like the land, like the land is historically like somewhat not contested, but like it's been occupied by different groups, and like the independence that you think like what worked out didn't work out, like literally caused ethnic cleansing on both sides. It's like bad, it's terrible.
Okay, wait, hold on.
It literally did.
Do not both sides.
I'm not both sides in the sense
you literally just said both sides.
Okay, no, okay. I feel like both sides has like a colloquial meaning and like a literal meaning. Like on the colloquial meaning, like they're equally bad. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying you can look at the demographics. Like the Serbs, like ethnic Serbs, there were also like the ethnic, like I don't know.
Okay, there were both Serbs and Albanians here. However, It seems like the difference is the people who were protesting in favor of like an independent Kosovo were pretty okay, at least at first, with Serbs remaining there. It was Serbian occupation and oppression that escalated most of this. Like student protests would then lead to Serbian... Yeah, well, hold on. They seem to have a pretty strong claim to secession. They were an area with a history of autonomous governance that had been historically oppressed by a neighboring region with a different ethnic group. They had a separate claim to the region on account of the historical autonomy, and it seemed like there were long-standing ethnic tensions that were getting worse with time. They wanted independence for decades, for a century. Isn't that enough? Shouldn't they be free?
I think you could make the same. I think you could make most of the same claims to the other side too. I think that's something that's complicated.
Wait, then fine. Then Serbia declare independence from Kosovo. That's fine.
No,
if both sides,
the Kosovo Serbs in Kosovo can make the same argument that it shouldn't be Serb, they should be the part of Serb, part of Yugoslavia.
How can you be a leftist and take this position? If a region is being ethnically oppressed by their more powerful, different autonomy neighbor or whatever. Shouldn't we support autonomy in this respect?
I think it caused a bunch of it was bad. It created it led to bad outcomes. I think
no, wait, no, it didn't. Kosovo's independence led to good outcomes. Serbia's desperate attempt to maintain control over Kosovo led to bad outcomes.
I don't know. I feel like I think if you support a secessionist movement that's that has terrible outcomes. It doesn't.
Wait. I'm sorry. You can't break free. Are we against the American Revolution now? Are we against the Vietnamese people?
If the American Revolution led to really bad outcomes.
Wait, you keep saying bad outcomes as though Serbia wasn't the one genociding Albanians. You keep lead to bad outcomes. Don't listen, oppressed ethnic group. Don't you resist your masters, because if you do, we'll kill you.
I'm not saying they're equivalent, but there was literally ethnic cleansing on both sides.
No, stop. No, stop. The Albanian army did not march into Serbia and displace 1 million people from their homes and kill tens of thousands.
Serbs in Kosovo, which was part of Serbia. It's like if you're living in Texas, Texas seceded.
The Serbs only started leaving Kosovo after Serbian authorities cracked down on Kosovo nationalist sentiments. I'm pretty sure things would have been a lot better if Serbia had just let Kosovo go, which they wanted for a century. They wanted for a century beforehand. And now they're separate. And Serbia still doesn't recognize Kosovo as a separate country.
I don't know. I just think there was this were I think that if the American Revolution had led to was a much more dangerous. It's I don't know, the British crackdown.
You can't say ethnic groups shouldn't resist oppression because the consequences of resisting oppression could be them being genocided. It doesn't work that way.
If it's bad enough, I think that's practical, right? It's pragmatic.
No, the pragmatic thing would be to fight against the people doing the genocide, wouldn't it?
I don't know if that's pragmatic. If you have small groups,
what?
Make it work. What? What do you mean?
Well, hey, listen. I did fight against the people who did the genocide. My glorious NATO brethren bombed the fuck out of them, all right? And upon the corpses of 1,500 Serbs did we pave the path for Kosovoian independence. I did fight the oppressor. You don't think it's practical? Well, hey, NATO disagrees. We found a way.
I think it caused a bunch of suffering on both sides.
How can you? You can't. You're literally like it's like, dude, like you're a Serbian nationalist.
I'm not. I feel like I don't know. I'm not a Serbian nationalist.
You're a Serbian nationalist. You don't have a strong position on whether like you have two ethnic groups that are locked together because of Yugoslavia post World War I. The Albanians with Kosovo in their autonomous region, and the Serbians. And the Serbians have consistently oppressed them for a century.
It's like not that much. There was a bunch of there's a bunch of Serbs living in Kosovo. Like I don't know what to say. Like
that's fine. Wait. And were the Serbs expelled from Kosovo back in '81 during the protests, or were the Serbs only leaving Kosovo after ethnic tensions were worsened when Serbia sent troops in to contain Kosovo nationalist sentiment?
Andrew, like
Slow down.
it was like. Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
With regards to like what led to those outcomes and the expulsions of Serbians from Kosovo, was that not a direct product of the ethnic tensions which arose from Serbia sending in people to crack down on Kosovo independence? Like the Serbs weren't expelled from Kosovo like by mandate back in '81 during the protests. Like they left because ethnic tensions were worsening because Serbia would not let Kosovo go.
Like I think there was a better outcome. I think there was a better solution. I think.
Okay, what would your preferred solution have been?
Well, I think that a ceding, like I think some of the demand, like I don't know, like for example, if a region in the U.S. tried to secede, I think most people,
I don't think that's comparable. There is no state in the United States that is majority people who have been for like a century ethnically oppressed by their neighbors, and are like desperate for freedom. I just don't think that's comparable.
Like, can you repeat the question? Sorry, you like paused out on me. Sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
I don't think the situation with Kosovo is comparable to any country in the United States. The fact, like, okay, are you against any kind of national secession? Like, are you just against it as a rule?
National secession, in my opinion, is like, it means war usually. So I'm like, basically, like my default position is, in my opinion, negative. Like it has to like justify itself because war is, but I think war is like harmful. You know, is that fair? I think it's fair. Like I think the default position of secession is that it has to clear a bar because war's bad, and secession is basically guaranteed war. Like there's no state can not like the concept of state kind of like requires like suppressing like stopping secession. Do you agree with that?
Okay, aren't you taking the side of the oppressor then? If you would disagree with any like, so do you think like India should have never like rebelled against British occupation?
I think I think secession is something that's a little different. But like I think that they cleared the bar there. Yeah, like I think
so?
There was not a better solution in my opinion.
Okay, how do you magically determine what the like? Isn't it better that Kosovo is separate from Serbia now? It's better. There's less conflict.
But the region is worse off for both of them.
How? How was it worse off for both of them? Kosovo's economy.
They're both like poor. They're both poorer.
They were poor before.
Violence. Like they were, but okay. Both group is poorer now. Kosovo stopped receiving. Kosovo was being basically funded by like the Yugoslavian government. Like it was receiving like it was not a net producer. You know how you have states right in the U.S. Like some states are like some states in the U.S. are like exporters, some are like importers. Like
yes.
Alabama that takes money and California produces money, right? So like one country.
So
Kosovo was an importer,
but Kosovo wanted independence.
And like it's worse off, and Serbia is worse off. Like both countries are worse off, and I think there's a solution that makes both countries not less. Like that could have.
But they wanted the independence.
But I think the cost was really high. Like what? It was like extremely like there's a lot of violence.
Why are you so against like the concept of like autonomy? Like you don't get to decide for them. They decided. I don't think the Kosovoian people are idiots, you know. I think they understood, like, where they were at. They preferred independence.
Does every region get to, like,
get to decide that they should be free? Yes, I do think people should get to decide that they can be free.
Sort of like California wants to be free, right? They can just declare being free, like.
If the people of California genuinely wanted to secede, if there was an actual reason they wanted to secede, then I would hear them out. But they would have to be freeing themselves from something. Not just, I think I should declare a new nation.
The rest of the U.S., right? That's like...
No. Actual freedom. The people of Kosovo experienced a century of oppression by Serbs. They were actually a meaningfully, ethnically, politically, geographically distinct group that wanted to split and had been separate before World War I.
They were like, it was a heterogeneous, like, region.
They were literally a separate country that got roped into Yugoslavia.
Serbs were living there. No, it wasn't. It was a Serb region. No, it was originally Serbian, and it was
how far back? How far back?
Like 1300s.
Prehistory, inhabited for nearly 10,000 years. Well, if we like our blood and soil arguments, let's go.
Hey,
by the way, interesting.
1389.
Hey, here's a question. Here's a question, by the way. If you're keen on the idea that Albanians are ethnically distinct from the otherwise more or less ethnically homogenous. No, you distinguished Albanians from the rest of you.
They're more ethnically distinct than the other three. Like,
okay, then why are they more ethnically distinct?
I think they're, like, not Slavs. I think they're, like, Illyrians.
Where'd they come from?
Like, I think the area. I think Slavs, like, the people came. I think they came from, like, I think the mountains. Like, I think they come from the mountains, like, on the, you know, in the West Balkans. And I'm, like, pretty sure.
Then how were they in Kosovo in 1300 to be conquered?
What? What time? How were they in Kosovo when?
In the 1300s to be conquered by Serbia.
What they were? That was like the Ottomans. That was like the Ottomans. It was Serbs and Ottomans fighting.
This whole region is pretty small. The West Mountains. What do you mean, like 100 miles west? How fine? How granular are the ethnic distinctions in the Balkans?
Like, very, I don't know.
I feel like this is like ethnic distinctions between like French and English people, except not even, because I'm pretty sure like the Balkan region is like practically the size of France. So it'd be like
Albanians are different groups within. Not Slavs, I don't think. I think they're Illyrians. They're less Slav. Slavs like which means like they're older. I think because Slavs are like what 7th century, moved down from like north. I think. Basically, like the Albanians are like basically part of the we're basically part of the Ottoman Empire. That's like their.
I'm looking up right now. Hold on. The first battle of Kosovo back in 1389. I can't believe I'm learning about this right now. Holy shit! It's fucking 11. Sultan Murad I gathered a coalition of soldiers and volunteers from neighboring countries in Anatolia and Rumelia, which no longer exist, of course. Christian army heavily outnumbered by the Ottomans. The Serbian army was defeated. Oh shit! And Lazar was slain, although Murad I was killed.
This is a big moment. This is like the big. I don't know. What's the equivalent? Like, what do you have in the U.S. the equivalent to this?
This is the Alamo.
Is the Alamo like that?
Yeah, this is the Alamo.
Yeah, it's like Serbian Alamo. Serb Alamo.
A source recognized Serbian night. Battle been mythologized as a great Serbian defeat. Time divided, stalemate, even it's victory vassal of the Ottomans. Serbia is part of the empire. Second Battle of Kosovo in 1448. Jesus Christ, you fuckers have been killing each other for nearly 1,000 years. Holy fuck, get a separate country. Okay.
It's like the
Second Battle of Kosovo was fought over 2 days. Hungarian enforcement by John Hunyadi. John. Okay, that's an interesting Hungarian name. I guess I just don't associate it with like mid-15th century battles. Ottoman army led by Murad II, significantly larger than the first battle, with both armies numbering twice that of the first battle. The ending was the same. The Hungarian army was defeated and pushed from the field. Damn, Kosovo! The loss of the battle was a setback for those resisting the Ottoman invasion, not a crushing blow to the cause. Albania and Skanderberg. I'm becoming a Kosovoian nationalist. It's crazy how my brain.
I don't think there's any Albanians there at the time, so I don't know if there's anyone to be like.
No, right here it says the Albanian army under Skanderbeg an Albanian feudal lord or
Oh, he's the
military
second one.
commando. Well, he led a rebellion against the Ottoman Empire in what is today Albania, North Macedonia, Greece, Kosovo,
Yeah, I
Montenegro,
don't
and
think they were
Serbia. Your ancestor, he led a rebellion to free your people. This Albanian,
everyone here is my people. Everyone here is my people. What?
this
Like, I'm not
Albanian
like I'm not
freed
super
you
homogenous. Everyone here,
from the yoke of
everyone here
Ottoman
is my
oppression.
people. Everyone here is my people. I'm like related to all of them. We're like the same people. These Albanians like not that like they're distinct. They're not like ultra distinct.
Hey,
And I'm part of that. Anyways,
Albanian
like, doesn't
people
matter.
and rule. Let me see. Had completely disorganized the Serb state. Was founder of Skanderbeg at the end of the 14th and start of the 15th century. Managed to carve a principality from Izmir to Prizren at the heart of the region of Kosovo. Region of the modern Kosovo became the Albanian Principality of Dukagjini. Lek Dukagjini ruled what is today part of northern
You
Albania.
don't get this with American history. We're like we're talking about the geopolitical region. Let's go back to some medieval battle.
Oh yeah, no, American history is nowhere near this interesting. Western Kosovo had a significant reservoir of a native Albanian population by the time of the full Ottoman takeover. Okay, hold on. The Ottomans are about to win. Okay, the Ottomans won. Okay, the Ottomans won. They brought Islam. Christians got epically pwned. Jesus. Let me see. So Serbs and Albanians. There was a migration of Albanians from the Mal Sea, but these were slow, long-term processes. Okay. Centuries ruled by the Ottoman Empire. Despite the imposition of Muslim rule, a large number of Christians continued to live and sometimes prosper. The Ottoman Empire was pretty cringe. It did some cool stuff, I think, but I haven't read up on them. So
It's a mixed bag.
Yeah, I could say it's a mixed bag like MLK. Considerably more rights and privileges than Christian subjects. Okay, 17th century. Catholic Albanians moving from the mountains of northern Albania into the plains of Kosovo. Oh, here we go. The Catholic Albanians moved because they had fled blood feuds or been punished under the Knug of Lik Dugahin. Okay, a set of Albanian traditional customary laws which directed all aspects of the Albanian tribal society. Holy shit, that sounds metal as fuck. Oh my god. The fucking... How far back does this go? Kept alive orally by the tribal elders. Jesus fucking Christ. The Albanians are like...
You can keep going back if you really want to. Like,
Jesus.
we started with the Battle of Kosovo, but like you can just keep going.
Yeah, I know. It's like American history starts like 250 years ago, and it's like American history starts after gunpowder is invented. Like, let's learn about the fucking Balkan region, and you go back to like the mammoths and the Paleolithic era. Okay. Sorry, I'm almost done. Hold on.
Which section? What are you reading? I don't stream up.
Just the Wikipedia article in the history of Kosovo. I don't even have the article on stream because I'm a terrible live streamer. Sorry. Okay.
I forgot what you're reading, so I can like follow.
It's just the Wikipedia article on the history of Kosovo.
Okay.
I don't even know what point I'm trying to get at even now. Okay. Oh wait.
History's fun.
That is true. Okay, hold on. Okay. Catholic Albanians from the establishment of the war, the Ottomans, Kosovo, the Patriotic Scutari, Albanian dynasty, Albanian
the
inhabitants.
nationalist leader of the cross in Yugoslavia was a historian. That's like not super relevant.
Albanian insurrection.
Interesting.
Okay, I think if nothing else, we've definitely established that Albanians have a pretty strong ethnic claim to Kosovo. But then we have the Albanian nationalist movement in the late 19th century. Albanian inhabited lands, League Prize. Then we have the Balkan Wars. Look at the maps. This map is so big. Oh my god, look at this. How the fuck am I supposed to parse this? Holy shit. This is like a Holy Roman Empire map. Holy fuck. Jesus Christ.
Which map are you opening?
Just it's the ethnic map of the Balkans, Heinrich Kiepert, 1882. Balkan Wars, Albanian. Okay, I'm gonna keep it 100 with you. It seems like the Albanians have wanted to be free for literally like all of human history. I'm reading through the patterns here, and it just seems like maybe not necessarily Kosovo, but the Albanians specifically have been looking for freedom for a very long time.
Country.
Huh?
That exists. Albania is a country. Like,
well,
they got
like
it after
Albanians,
War II. That's the start of Albania.
Yeah, but like
That
Albanians
to
broadly,
develop a national image. Like, they were like to the nationalism movement.
Like Albanians broadly.
Sure, but like for Kosovo specifically is like not like I would say the strength.
They've been here for at least 700 years.
But that's like the region was like what 20 like
that's enough.
It was like 75% is enough.
700 years of occupation is sufficient for me to decide that an area is like occupied by a given
But they were
ethnic.
being occupied by different people. But it was like occupied by different people. So I don't know, the occupation. Sure, but other people were living there too. Like what?
Okay, but it seems like the Albanians weren't the ones forcing the Serbs out. The Serbs were the ones oppressing the Albanians in Kosovo. Look, during this period of the Balkan Wars, the majority of the population of Kosovo was Albanian and did not welcome Serb rule. They've been the oppressed minority in this area for over a century. The region was conquered by Serbia in 1912 and remained occupied territory until 1918 when it became a part of Yugoslavia. I was right! Serbians may have had historical claim to the area, but there was significant Kosovoian Albanian independence sentiment and nationalist sentiment for hundreds of years beforehand. And then, like, yoink, Serbia conquered them, and then yoink, the Yugoslav kingdom happened. Like, I was correct. They have they absolutely have a claim. Look, many Albanians still kept resisting Serbian army and fought for the unification of Kosovo with Albania. Yeah! Both Isa Bilatini and Idris Seferi continued fighting. Other well-known rebels at the time were Azem Galika, also known by Azem Bijta, and his wife Shot Galika. What awesome names, by the way. They were a colonized group. And then Albanians were forced to flee. Serbian troops attempted to alter the region's demographic structure through murders and mass expulsions. Between 1918 and 1945, over 100,000 Albanians left Kosovo. Dude! You conquered them fucking 8 years before Yugoslavia, and then in Yugoslavia, you fucking genocided them more? And then after Tito dies, you're mad that they won independence? And then they genocide them again? They genocided them again! I am now racist against Serbs. This is the new arc. We're abandoning the fortress arc.
Pivot against the class part of the Balkan strategy is you just pivot away from being Serb to Serb racist. You know, it's classic. Montenegrin. That's a new thing. It has its own language now.
Anti-Serbian racism is now my #1 political belief. It takes precedent over everything else that I believe in. I'm sorry. I'm really tired. I'm getting loopy. Vaush say God is Albania. Okay. I'm sorry. No, this has to stop. This has gone on for too long. Okay, we've talked for it feels like we've talked for it's been 3 hours? Okay, wow. Okay. Would you believe me if I told you that I actually really enjoyed the conversation?
I believe you. Yeah, I had fun. I had more fun. Actually, towards the end. At the beginning, I was pretty nervous, but now I feel like towards the end, I felt like I was having I don't know.
No, I actually really enjoyed it. Thank you for coming on. Seriously, I actually really appreciate it.
I hope I beat the Serbian nationalist allegations.
No, hey, listen, okay.
I'm going to look at chat later. I don't know.
When the trials began. We'll find out. Well, Chad. I mean, Chad hated you the entire time, of course. They do that against everyone.
I'm certain, but I just want to know how I gotta see it. I don't know if I should see it, but I feel like.
Okay. Can I be 100% real with you?
I mean, I can't stop you, right?
That is true. I genuinely, honest to God, I feel like I'm trying to think of a good analogy here. Okay, your brain is like somebody painted a beautiful portrait, okay? Like somebody painted a beautiful, like a romantic portrait of like cherry blossoms over the river, okay? All right? And then I feel like somebody took a stick and like swooshed right through it. There's like this masterpiece with one drastic alteration that has changed everything, you know? Like the paint was still wet. But I feel like if you could simply take the same stick and go and swoosh it in the opposite direction in exactly the same way. Yeah. And what I'm referring to, of course, is you being Balkan. This is the critical damage. No. Real though.
Also, step 2 is like fast forwarding to 2 times speed and like talking way too fast.
Oh no. Well, that's just because you're nervous. That's not a crime. That's fine.
No, I speak, I don't know, really fast all the time. Everyone I know complains about it.
Well, no matter how fast, it's a skill, okay? Ben Shapiro made a lot of money off of it. No, I enjoyed the conversation. Seriously, I feel
That's not a bit.
I feel like I'm trying to think of like a good comparison for this. I feel like there are types of disagreements that get built up. There are types of disagreements that people can have that are reflective of really, really strong negative underlying problems. Where like if there are disagreements, like the difference between them is really, really significant. And then I feel like there are differences that feel really significant, but in reality sometimes it's just as simple as like a color swap, where you're actually potentially really, really close. It would take no effort at all. There's just like a slight difference. I don't know. But it feels like it's as different. It's just a matter of what to change. Anyway, I'm rambling. I'm super tired. Hey,
Yeah,
listen,
sure. I guess the real solution is I gotta spend more time arguing with Serb nationalists or like, and then I'll definitely like pivot
yes,
like towards you.
we're
Like nothing gets me,
we're on the anti-Serbian nationalist arc all over.
nothing makes me support, Kosovo independence more than arguing with Serb nationalists who are like a little bit mega fascists.
I really appreciate the conversation, and I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, it's fun. I don't know. Maybe I'll distribute you something later, like email again.
Have a wonderful night.